On a calm November morning in a close community in North Carolina, 13-year-old Hania Aguilar had taken her aunt's car keys that morning so she could start the car before school. That's when a witness saw a man dressed in black with a yellow scarf covering his face approach the girl and force her into a green 2003 Ford Expedition. Her terrified scream filled the air as the vehicle drove off. This event sparked a heartbreaking mystery that disturbed the entire community. What happened to Hania? Hania Aguilar was born on March 21, 2005, in the United States to Miguel and Celsa, who are both immigrants from Guatemala seeking a better life. Hania was remembered by family and friends as a cheerful, loving, and kind-hearted girl with big dreams. She was outgoing, dedicated as a daughter, sister, and friend. She leaving a positive impact on those around her with her friendly demeanor, engaging conversations. From a young age, she had a deep passion for music, often filling her home with the sounds of her violin. In 2018, Hania's family was living comfortably in Rosewood Mobile Home Park in Lumberton, North Carolina, a neighborhood mainly populated by Hispanic immigrants. Hania, 13, was an outstanding 8th grade student at Lumberton Middle School. However, on the morning of November 5, 2018, their peaceful life was disrupted. Around 7 a.m., while Hania was warming up the family vehicle outside their home, a stranger approached her from behind. He grabbed her and pushed her into the vehicle. A nearby neighbor heard screams and saw a man dressed in black with a yellow bandana forcing Hania into the green SUV, which quickly drove away. Hania's younger sister, who was outside at the time, witnessed the horrific event. Authorities were notified right away, and by 10 a.m., an Amber Alert was issued for Hania. She is a 13-year-old Hispanic girl, about 125 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. On the day she was taken, she was wearing a blue floral shirt, blue jeans. The Lumberton police, assisted by local and federal agencies, began a thorough search. Helicopters flew over the Rosewood area, and police officers stopped cars entering the region, asking drivers for any information. During a press conference, the police chief announced that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children had shared Hania's details with authorities in Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, and South Carolina. Investigators indicated there was no evidence that Hania was acquainted with her abductor. Her family was fully cooperative throughout the investigation. The community, friends, and neighbors joined law enforcement in the search, showing their support, concern. On November 6th, Celsa made an emotional appeal through the FBI, expressing her profound love for her daughter and her desire for her safe return. She forgave those responsible and said her only wish was to reunite with her daughter. The case swiftly attracted national attention. The FBI, working with the governor's office, announced a $20,000 reward for any information that could help locate Hania. On the same day, a surveillance video was released showing the stolen green 2003 Ford Expedition shortly after the abduction. Authorities encouraged anyone with home surveillance footage that might be helpful to come forward. The vehicle had peeling paint on the hood, a sticker on the rear window, and North Carolina license plates. The next day, the Ford Expedition was discovered abandoned in a wooded area about 3 miles from Hania's home. Evidence from the vehicle was sent to the FBI laboratory in Virginia for analysis. Later that day, the FBI released a disturbing video showing a man walking purposefully through the area, as if stalking his target. This footage unsettled viewers, disclosing the calculated nature of the abduction. Notably, he was the only person seen in the area at the time of the abduction. This crucial footage aimed to identify the man and assess his possible involvement in the case. Authorities urged the public to assist in identifying the suspect. The investigation intensified as the community remained hopeful for Hania's safe return. As the search became more urgent, investigators turned their attention to a new lead. They believed that the girl's unique white Adidas sneakers, which had colorful stitching on the heel, could be key to finding her. Authorities speculated that the captor might have discarded the sneakers and urged the community to report any related discoveries. The FBI emphasized the need for public vigilance, reminding everyone that even the smallest detail could be important. They carefully analyzed the evidence and used media outreach to request assistance. The search for Hania was highlighted on the FBI's website as the most wanted case of the week. A Spanish-language podcast was released to ask for tips. Additionally, authorities directly appealed to hunters in Robeson County, asking them to check any surveillance footage for signs of the green SUV to figure out when and how it had been left behind. By Thanksgiving, the investigation had generated over 800 leads, interviewed more than 400 people, and analyzed extensive surveillance footage. However, the holiday was incredibly painful for Hania's family, filled with a profound emptiness. Friends and neighbors described the day as excruciatingly sad. The loss of Hania's laughter felt deeply. The community united, offering prayers and finding comfort in their collective hope that she could sense their love, no matter where she was. On November 27, 23 days after her disappearance, the investigation took a tragic turn. Authorities found a body at 4:45 p.m. in a shallow pond, located 10 miles from the abduction site. The body was face down, unclothed, covered by a folding table, with branches and leaves in the hair. Due to advanced decomposition, immediate identification was not possible, but dental records confirmed the identity later. This discovery shattered any remaining hopes of finding Hania alive and deeply affected her family. Neighbors gathered outside their home to provide support and prayers. Lumberton's police chief confirmed the tragic news. He was visibly upset and expressed deep sympathy for Hania's family. The medical examiner later determined that her death was caused by homicide, likely due to asphyxiation from pressure on her throat. There were also indications of abuse violence, but the extent of decomposition made some findings unclear. Authorities, along with the FBI, pledged to keep seeking justice, reassuring the public that they would not stop until those responsible for this terrible crime were brought to justice. The news of Hania's death shocked the community, especially among Hispanic residents, who united to seek justice for her. About 10 days later, authorities made an important discovery. Michael Ray McClellan, a 34-year-old man with a history of abuse offenses, was arrested while on parole at the time of the abduction. Investigators found DNA evidence from an unsolved 2016 abuse-assault case that connected Michael to Hania. His arrest provided some sense of closure, but the sorrow over Hania's loss continued to weigh heavily on everyone who knew and loved her. On December 8, Michael went before a state magistrate at the Robeson County Detention Center and was formally charged with multiple crimes related to Hania. He was denied bail and faced a total of 10 charges, which included first-degree murder, first-degree abuse, abuse offenses against a minor under 15, first-degree abuse assault, statutory sexual offense with a minor, first-degree kidnapping, aggravated assault, felony restraint, child abduction, and concealing a body. The prosecution indicated that more charges might be added following the final toxicology and autopsy reports. Investigators believed Michael's actions were driven by racial prejudice and stereotypes, particularly against Hispanic communities, based on a false belief that these communities were vulnerable and involved in banned substance or money. Evidence showed that he intentionally targeted victims in places like the mobile home park where Hania lived. As the legal proceedings continued, Hania's funeral took place, drawing over 1,000 attendees, many of whom wore her favorite color, purple. The ceremony included balloons, flowers, and heartfelt speeches from family and friends. During the funeral, Celsa shared her last moments with her daughter. She spoke of her daughter as someone whose life was tragically cut short, but whose joy could never be taken away. With tears in her eyes, she promised to remain strong and support other families facing similar losses. She also thanked the authorities for their efforts to bring her daughter home. During the service, photos of Hania were displayed. Her friends read heartfelt letters and played her favorite song, A Thousand Years. Her white coffin, with her name in gold letters, was carried by a horse-drawn carriage to a cemetery in Lumberton. After the funeral, the case attracted controversy when District Attorney Johnson Britt revealed that the sheriff's office had DNA evidence that McClellan could be a suspect in the 2016 abuse, but investigators never followed up. According to Britt, an email with that information was sent to the sheriff's office in 2017, copied from the district attorney's office. At the time, Britt said that information should have given the sheriff's office probable cause to obtain a search warrant, take a DNA sample from McClellan and compare it to the 2016 abuse kit. 3 weeks before Hania disappeared, the Fairmont Police Department issued an arrest warrant for Michael. He was charged with theft and unlawful restraint related to a failed car robbery. However, this warrant was not acted upon until November 13th, which was 8 days after Hania's abduction. Additionally, on October 17th, the State Parole and Post-Release Supervision Commission issued another arrest warrant for parole violations, but no action has been taken regarding this matter. At a press conference, the prosecutor criticized the sheriff's office for mishandling evidence. He argued that the information received in 2017 should have led officers to collect DNA samples from Michael much sooner. After an internal investigation into these mistakes, the Robeson County Sheriff's Office apologized to Hania's family on January 18, 2019. They announced the firing of an investigator and noted that a senior officer with over 34 years of experience, who had been suspended, decided to resign. Police department leaders expressed their anger over the situation, highlighting that issues like improper report handling, inadequate investigations, and poorly conducted interviews indicated a systemic problem. They found these failures very concerning and called for major reforms. In the following years, the family's hope for justice diminished due to ongoing legal delays. The global issues worsened the situation. Hania's mother expressed her frustration from the justice system. During a pre-trial hearing, she urged the judge to expedite the case, claiming that the system had failed her family. On the other hand, Michael's defense argued that the global issues significantly restricted their ability to meet with him. They also had to manage 2 other unrelated felony cases involving Michael, further contributing to the delays. The Superior Court judge informed CELSA that it might take up to 5 additional years after the global issues for such a complex case to reach trial, emphasizing the importance of thoroughness to avoid mistakes that could lead to a retrial. Michael's trial underwent multiple delays and was finally rescheduled for early 2024. During this period, the community kept Hania's memory alive by commemorating her on her birthday, the anniversary of her passing, and other special occasions. Family and friends arranged events to honor her. Neighbors and former classmates remembered her as a beautiful young girl whose life ended too soon, someone who should have enjoyed a long and happy life. On the 2nd anniversary of her passing, CELSA shared that, as a mother, she could no longer look forward to Thanksgiving or Christmas. Her grief had overwhelmed her. These once joyful holidays had turned into painful reminders of her loss, making them hard for her to bear. Michael McClellan was finally brought to trial at the Robeson County Courthouse in North Carolina, where the prosecution aimed for the death penalty. They argued that the severity of his crimes warranted this ultimate punishment. During his transfer to court, Michael made a daring attempt to escape by using a homemade handcuff key. This attempt failed as officers quickly restrained him, but he tried again just hours later, showing his desperation to evade justice. The Robeson County Sheriff suggested that Michael had hidden the makeshift key under his tongue, but it became stuck in the handcuffs during his 2nd attempt. As a result, security measures were significantly increased for the rest of the trial. In court, Michael pleaded guilty to all the charges against him. Confronted by Hania's grieving mother, he gave a brief and disturbing confession. He admitted to kidnapping Hania from her driveway, assaulting her, killing her, and disposing of her body. He also revealed details about earlier attacks in 2016 and 2018, highlighting his pattern of violent behavior. These admissions had a significant impact on his sentencing. The court sentenced Michael to life in prison without the chance of parole. Hania's mother felt both relief and sadness following the sentencing. She expressed gratitude to the authorities and the community for their strong support during the long and difficult process. Although no punishment could reverse the tragedy, she mentioned that the sentence provided her family with a sense of justice and closure. The FBI special agent who led the investigation also felt satisfied with the verdict, hoping it would bring comfort to Hania's family and other victims impacted by Michael's crimes. However, what seemed to be the end of a painful chapter took a surprising turn. While Michael was being transferred to the North Carolina Central Prison in Raleigh, he attempted to escape again. He struck the latch of a guard's firearm holster, causing the weapon to become loose. Michael briefly grabbed the gun, but the transport vehicle's driver reacted quickly, slamming on the brakes and allowing another officer to take the weapon away from him. After a brief struggle, officers used pepper spray to subdue him. Michael then surrendered and was placed in a high-security cell, with authorities considering adding more charges to his already lengthy criminal record. Despite his persistent attempts to avoid justice, Michael is set to spend the rest of his life in prison. The case had a lasting effect on the Hispanic community in North Carolina, increasing their fears and mistrust of local authorities. Community members pointed out the failures of law enforcement in the early investigation and demanded reforms to prevent similar negligence in the future. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery: the case of the Milken family. In the quiet neighborhood near Forbes Lake in Kirkland, Washington, the Milken family exemplified the American dream. Their home was filled with love, laughter, and the joy of a well-established life. The head of the family is Leonid Milken, a sergeant in the Washington National Guard. His journey began in 1989 when he and his family emigrated from Ukraine, seeking a new beginning in the United States. By 2006, Leonid was stationed in Iraq, bravely confronting the challenges of war. Despite the distance, his heart remained with his family, and he eagerly counted down the 6 weeks until he could return home. He was deeply supported and cherished by his wife, Olga. Born on July 22, 1977, Olga is a professional dental assistant in Bellevue. She skillfully balanced her career with raising their 2 young sons, was known by neighbors for her friendly and welcoming nature. Olga and Leonid have 2 sons, Justin, who is 5 years old, and Andrew, who is 3 years old. They bring joy and energy to the home. Justin was very proud of his father and often told people that he was in the military. Both boys were loved very much, and their aunt, who is Olga's younger sister, often showered them with special affection. At 24, Lyubov Botvina, Olga's younger sister, was full of ambition and kindness. She was a sophomore at Seattle Pacific University, studying for a bachelor's degree in foreign languages. She often visited the Milken family to spend time with her nephews, Andrew and Justin. The Milken family's journey from Ukraine to the United States was challenging. However, with resilience and a love for life, they managed to rebuild their lives from scratch. They settled in Mill Creek, Washington, and became vital members of the local Russian-Ukrainian community. Their home was a warm refuge filled with love, dreams, and a blend of cultures, a place where their past and future were harmoniously connected. Tragically, on July 17, 2006, their story took a horrific turn when an unimaginable incident shattered their world. After firefighters extinguished the fire and entered the ruins of the house, they discovered the bodies. However, these individuals did not die from the fire. The cause of their deaths remains a mystery. They had been stabbed multiple times, sustaining serious injuries. Someone had done this on purpose to make them suffer. The police quickly identified their main suspect, shocking the entire neighborhood. Connor Skierman, a 24-year-old man who had recently moved across the street from the Milken family just 2 weeks prior, came under suspicion. Witnesses reported seeing him trespassing on their property while carrying a red gasoline container shortly before the fire broke out. The most disturbing detail was the deep scratches on his face, suggesting he had engaged in a struggle, possibly with someone desperate to escape his actions. Connor was arrested on July 19, just 2 days after the murders. During questioning, he confessed to starting the fire but claimed to have no memory of the murders themselves. He said he passed out from drinking too much alcohol that night, specifically 3 bottles of vodka. He only remembered waking up in the Milken family's house, surrounded by dead bodies. So who was Connor Skierman? He was born in Bellevue, Washington, and before the tragic incident, he appeared to be an ordinary neighbor. However, beneath this facade lay a criminal with dark intentions. He had kept logs of the Milken family and plotted their demise. Later investigations revealed CCTV footage of him purchasing items to start a fire. Was this act motivated by hatred or a manifestation of a deeper monstrosity within him? This question would linger in the minds of many for years. Before the murders, Connor had no notable criminal history. His violent actions on July 17, 2006, stunned the community, resulting in his arrest and conviction for killing Olga, her two young sons, Justin and Andrew, and Lyubov. Connor acknowledged that he showered in Olga's home, changed into the hospital scrubs he found there, and bought gasoline to intentionally set the house on fire in order to conceal his involvement. However, he consistently denied committing the murders. Instead, he pleaded with the jury to trust him. Despite his claims, the evidence against him was overwhelming. When investigators examined the tragedy within the Milkin family, they meticulously collected the necessary evidence to charge Connor. Although the fire destroyed much at the scene, several key discoveries were still made. Among the burnt debris of the Milkin home, a blood-stained hunting knife was found at the bottom of the stairs. This knife was identified as the weapon used in the attack on Olga, Justin, Andrew, and Lyubov. In the master bedroom, where Olga and Lyubov's bodies were discovered, investigators uncovered clothing soaked in blood. This clothing provided DNA evidence that directly linked Connor to the scene of the crime. Additionally, a flashlight located in the same bedroom suggested that the attack was premeditated. A glove, partially burned in the fire, was found near the victims. This item not only placed Connor at the scene but also showed that he attempted to hide his fingerprints during the brutal attack on the family. Furthermore, security camera footage showed Connor buying gasoline from a nearby station shortly before the fire was reported. This evidence supported the timeline and his intention to destroy evidence by igniting the house. During Connor's arrest, officers noted fresh cuts and scratches on his face and neck, consistent with defensive wounds inflicted by the victims during their struggle, further connecting him to the crime. The conclusion was both horrifying and clear. This was not an accident or a drunken mistake. It was a planned massacre, a cold-blooded crime carried out with brutal intent. 3 years later, Connor Skierman's trial began. Selecting the jury took several weeks because the death penalty was a possibility. The prosecutors claimed that Connor had planned the attack, entering the home armed with the intention to kill. They argued that he had brutally murdered an entire family and then attempted to destroy the evidence by setting fire to the house. Connor's defense team focused on a different angle. They argued that he had been in an alcohol-induced blackout. They brought in addiction specialists, psychiatrists, and toxicologists to support their claim that Connor was too intoxicated to have intended to kill anyone and that he couldn't remember the murders due to his blacked-out state. However, the jury did not find this argument convincing. During the sentencing phase, Connor took the stand to give a 25-minute emotional statement. He pleaded with the jury for mercy, apologized to the Milkin family, and admitted to setting the house on fire, but he did not confess to the murders. He appeared subdued, with a face showing regret and anxiety. As he spoke, his voice trembled, and he frequently wiped away tears with a tissue, struggling to stay composed while also conveying his remorse through his slumped posture. During his speech, Connor avoided discussing the details of the crimes, following legal advice and the rules that allow defendants in death penalty cases to talk without being cross-examined. Instead, he concentrated on expressing his regret and the effect that his potential execution would have on his family. However, his words fell short. As he spoke, the Milkin family remained silent, their faces expressing a mixture of emotions, pain, anger, and perhaps a desire for closure. Olga's husband, Leonid Milkin, who was serving in Iraq when the murders occurred, listened closely, but his feelings were hard to read. The pain he endured was unimaginable, and now he had to confront the man responsible for his loss. Connor's defense attorney, James Conroy, argued that Connor was a troubled man who was struggling with alcoholism. He claimed that during the murder, Connor experienced memory loss due to the effects of alcohol. However, the jury found this explanation unconvincing, which led to the guilty verdicts. In this pivotal moment, Conroy hoped that Connor's display of remorse might influence the jury to show mercy. The prosecution, led by King County Deputy Prosecutor Scott O'Toole, presented a contrasting narrative. They portrayed Connor as a calculated murderer who broke into the Milkin family's home and committed horrific acts. The evidence clearly indicated the premeditated nature of his crime. O'Toole emphasized the profound grief of the Milkin family, particularly the innocence of the young boys, Justin and Andrew, whose lives were tragically taken by Connor. As Connor finished his statement, he stared intently at the jury, his eyes expressing desperation. He stated that people had told him that he was going to die and go to hell, adding that he was already there, his voice choked with emotion. After these final remarks, he returned to his seat, leaving the jury to process the heavy burden of his words and the seriousness of their imminent decision. The courtroom fell silent as the jurors contemplated what they had just heard. The decision ahead of them was significant, balancing justice, societal expectations, and the remnants of mercy that Connor's plea aimed to evoke. Many lives are at stake, not just Connor's, but those of others who will forever be affected by his actions. In the days that followed, the jury would deliberate, each member grappling with their conscience, the law, and the emotional testimonies shared during the trial. Connor's statement added a personal element to their responsibilities, humanizing a man found guilty of horrific crimes. Their verdict would determine not just Connor's future, but would also resonate through the lives of the victims' families, the Ukrainian community, and the larger conversation about justice and redemption. Everyone was focused on the jury, anticipating a verdict that would serve justice for the victims. The prosecution pointed to several factors to underscore the gravity of the charges: the multiple victims, with 4 people killed at the same time, their vulnerability, given the young ages of Justin and Andrew, which highlighted the victims' helplessness, and the attempt to conceal the crime, with arson being seen as part of a plan to destroy evidence and cover up the murder. Connor was found guilty of intentionally setting fire to the Milkin residence after the murders, indicating that the murders were premeditated. The prosecution claimed that the fire was a deliberate action to eliminate evidence and obstruct the investigation. On April 12, 2010, after 9 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict: guilty on all charges, which included 4 counts of aggravated first-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree arson. Connor was found guilty of 4 separate counts, each representing a victim: Olga Milkin, Justin Milkin, Andrew Milkin, and Lyubov Botvina. The penalty phase of the trial lasted 2 weeks and was filled with strong emotions. After a day and a half of deliberation, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty. On May 5, 2010, Judge Gregory Canova of the Kane County Superior Court officially sentenced Connor to death by lethal injection. As the sentence was announced, Connor allegedly shook his head in disbelief, while Leonid felt a sense of relief that justice had been served. Connor's defense team promptly announced plans to appeal the conviction to the Washington State Supreme Court, citing issues with jury selection and comments made by the prosecution during the trial. Connor's family, who were present at the sentencing, chose not to speak to the media. King County Prosecutor Dan Satterberg addressed reporters at a press conference, stating that the death penalty is the law in the state and is reserved for the worst crimes. Satterberg, who was not in office when the death penalty was sought against Connor, praised the prosecution team for successfully presenting the case to the jury, which he believed made the right decision. He expressed sympathy for the victims, mentioning that they were wonderful people whose American dream had been tragically shattered. In 2018, the Washington State Supreme Court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional, citing its inconsistent application and potential racial biases. This landmark decision resulted in all death sentences in the state being commuted to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Consequently, Connor's death sentence was changed to life imprisonment without parole. Despite facing significant challenges, the Kirkland community came together to support Leonid Milkin. During this difficult time, he found his neighbors ready to help him fight for his rights and rebuild his home. Local veterans and volunteers led the rebuilding efforts, while companies generously donated materials and labor. Together, they transformed the site of tragedy into a hopeful home, symbolizing resilience in the face of injustice caused by a man who disrupted their lives. Leonid, a sergeant, had come to the United States to provide a better life for his family, but after the tragedy, he was left to rebuild his life on his own. By 2010, 4 years after the murders, he was preparing to move back into his reconstructed home. He viewed it as both a memorial to his lost family and a fresh start for his future. He now lives there, carrying with him the memories of his 2 sons and beloved wife, still questioning why his peaceful life was taken from him. The Milken family massacre remains one of the most horrific crimes in Washington's history, a tragedy that shattered a family and deeply impacted the community. What do you think? Did justice truly prevail, or did Connor evade the punishment he deserved? Let's discuss. If you're interested in more cases like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for our next exploration of true crime's darkest stories. Perry March was born in 1961 to Arthur March and Zipporah. He and his wife, Janet, were complete opposites of each other. He is ordinary, but his wife was a very bright, beautiful woman, dreamy and talented. Janet grew up in a wealthy family, as the daughter of a well-known lawyer from Nashville. Janet and Perry met as students at the University of Michigan in the early 1980s and quickly became inseparable. When Perry graduated and moved to Chicago to work as a financial broker, Janet followed him without hesitation. However, she soon began to miss her home and family. To support Perry's education, her father agreed to pay for his expensive tuition at the prestigious Vanderbilt Law School. As a result, Janet and Perry returned to Nashville, and since Perry was hesitant, it was Janet who proposed to him in Percy Warner Park. They got married in 1987 and moved into a house in a well-known area of the city, which was rented and paid for by Janet's father. The following year, Perry graduated and chose to work for a local law firm in Nashville instead of accepting offers from large firms in New York. In 1990, Janet gave birth to a son named Samson, affectionately called Sammy. On the surface, this family seemed to have everything: a mother, a father, and a son. Unfortunately, this outward appearance of happiness was deceptive. In 1991, a scandal emerged at the law firm where Perry worked after a young female specialist received an inappropriate proposal from a colleague. A stranger sent her a letter expressing his attraction to her and his desire for an intimate relationship. Feeling embarrassed, the young woman reported the incident to her boss. After this, 2 more letters arrived, urging her to respond to the proposal by leaving a message in the firm's library. In response, the firm took measures to identify the sender of these inappropriate letters. They installed a CCTV camera in the library where she was supposed to leave her reply. When the man came to collect the letter, the firm's lawyers were shocked to discover that he was Perry March, the husband of Janet. Faced with evidence from the video, Perry refused to confess. The law firm gave him an ultimatum: resign or be fired. He chose to resign. This uncomfortable situation led to legal consequences, as the female employee who received the unwanted proposal sued Perry for financial compensation. He was ordered to pay her. To avoid a harassment claim, she requested $25,000, half of which Perry was to pay in monthly installments, while the remaining $12,500 was to be paid in a lump sum. This arrangement was made to keep his wife, Janet, from discovering the scandal. In 1994, Janet and Perry welcomed their second child, a lovely daughter named Zipporah. As their family grew, they decided to build a larger home and purchased nearly 2 acres in the affluent suburb of Forest Hill. Over the next year, they worked on constructing their dream house, a $650,000 mansion designed in the French country style. Janet was very enthusiastic about the project and closely oversaw every stage of the construction. However, her demands were sometimes unreasonable, leading Perry to step in and help mediate between her and the construction team. Although the new house brought excitement, Janet and Perry's marriage was facing difficulties. Their relationship had been strained for several months, and they frequently attended therapy, both together and individually. At home, they rarely communicated. Perry was often away for at least 3 days a week, and their arguments escalated whenever he returned. A family therapist suggested they take a break from each other, but Janet was adamant about getting a divorce. In August 1996, a significant incident occurred that changed the course of Janet and Perry's relationship forever. Perry needed to pay the final installment to a woman at a law firm, but, due to financial issues, he sent her a letter requesting to postpone the payment until October. Unfortunately, Janet read the letter, which led to a heated argument between them. In the aftermath, Janet contacted her mother to arrange a meeting with a divorce lawyer. On August 15, 1996, Janet was scheduled to meet with the lawyer but never arrived at the office because she mysteriously disappeared that night. Perry claimed that Janet left voluntarily after their argument. He told the police that she expressed a desire to get some space to think but did not specify where she was going. He said that at around 8:30 p.m., Janet packed a suitcase, took her passport and $1,500 in cash, and left in her car. He also mentioned that she left him a list of tasks to complete before her return. After she left, he informed friends and family of her departure as he normally would. The next morning, Deneen Beard, the maid, came to clean the house and was surprised to find everything in order. However, Perry asked her to focus on her work and not to go into the children's room. Then a nanny named Ella Goldschmidt, who had previously arranged with Janet that her son would play with Sammy, arrived. After Deneen left, Ella noticed Sammy jumping on an oriental rug that was rolled up on the floor next to the playroom. When she returned around 2 p.m. to pick up her son, the rug was no longer there. Initially, Janet's family believed Perry's explanation. Janet's father went to Nashville International Airport to check if Janet had left her car there. Janet's mother, Carolyn, became increasingly worried, as her daughter would not just vanish without a word and would never abandon her children. Although Carolyn wanted to contact the police, Perry convinced her to wait 12 days, claiming that Janet had said she would return by then. That evening, Perry called his father, Arthur, a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel living in Jalisco, Mexico. Arthur readily agreed to travel to Nashville to support his son during this challenging time. In the meantime, Janet's family's concerns continued to escalate. With August 25th being Sammy's 6th birthday, fears grew that something had happened to Janet. She would definitely not miss such an important occasion. While Perry and Janet's parents told the party guests she had traveled to California to visit her brother and was postponing her return due to an ear infection, her sudden disappearance raised alarm among her loved ones. Days passed without any news from Janet, and the anxious waiting could not go on much longer. On August 29th, Janet's parents reported her missing to the police. Detective David Miller, a skilled investigator with extensive experience, was assigned to the case. He initiated the investigation by reaching out to hospitals and reviewing Janet's bank and credit card accounts, which had not been used since her disappearance, raising concerns about her well-being. On September 7th, authorities located Janet's car in a parking lot at an apartment complex about 5 miles from her home. The car appeared to have been parked there for several weeks. Inside, police discovered Janet's bag, which contained her documents, passport, credit cards, and $11 in cash. They also found a suitcase filled with clothes, notably absent of a bra, toothpaste, a comb, or underwear, which seemed unusual. Additional evidence included a pair of white sandals in the glove compartment and unusual, dirty bicycle tire tracks near the car. Investigators needed to analyze this evidence carefully. On September 10, 1996, Perry was questioned by investigators and consented to a search of his home. The police conducted the search over the weekend of September 14th to 15th while Perry was away in Chicago with his children. The house showed no signs of domestic violence or anything noteworthy. A few days later, the owner of a tire store contacted law enforcement to inform them that Perry had visited the store on August 21st, a week after Janet went missing. Perry inquired about purchasing a new set of tires, despite the good condition of those already on his car. When asked why he wanted a different brand, his response raised further suspicions. On September 18th, Perry decided to move to Chicago with his children. Before leaving, he had a concerning conversation with Janet's longtime friend, Diane Sachs, which she later reported to the police. Perry asked Diane if she thought he could kill his wife. Although she hesitated to answer, he proceeded to ask the disturbing question of what she would think if he had loaded Janet's body into his car and taken it to a remote location for disposal. This raised serious suspicions about him. As a result, the police launched a comprehensive search for Janet, involving divers, 2 helicopters with thermal scanners, specially trained dogs, police officers, and volunteers. Meanwhile, Perry hired a lawyer, who informed the police that Perry would not cooperate with the investigation. In November, As Janet's parents held a day of mourning for her, Perry chose not to attend, further increasing the police's suspicions about him. Over time, a theory about Janet's disappearance began to develop. It was suggested that Perry and Janet had a heated argument the night she disappeared. During this argument, Janet may have said something that provoked Perry, leading him to strike her hard. Given that Perry held a black belt in martial arts, a single blow could have killed her, or he might have strangled her. Whether intentional or not, when he found Janet dead at his feet, he was faced with a dire decision. Investigators believe that Perry hid Janet's body either in the basement, in the woods, or near their home. Furthermore, Ella had mentioned that there was a rolled-up rug that she had noticed in Perry's house that morning. Janet's body may have been inside that carpet, and tragically, little Sammy may have unknowingly played around his mother's body. Afterward, Perry moved her body to his Jeep and drove to a location where he buried it. He then drove Janet's car to where it was later discovered, taking her mountain bike with him so he could ride it back home. However, these are merely speculations, and the police were tasked with uncovering evidence of the murder, marking a new phase in the investigation. Janet's father, a prominent lawyer, was determined to uncover the truth about his daughter's disappearance. Meanwhile, Perry applied to become the manager of Janet's estate, but her parents opposed this and filed their own petition. Perry refused to consent. Ultimately, the court designated a guardian to oversee Janet's property and ordered Perry to return some items he had taken. He only returned them after being urged to do so. This was just the beginning of a legal dispute between Perry and Janet's parents. The battle continued until late 1999 when the court granted Janet's parents the right to visit their grandchildren. They traveled to Perry's new home in Illinois, eager to see the children, but were shocked to discover that he had moved to Mexico to be with his father. Moreover, just weeks after relocating, Perry married a local woman named Carmen Rojas. 3 years had passed since Janet went missing, and she still had not been officially declared dead. This prompted her parents to file a lawsuit against Perry for the manslaughter of their daughter. When Perry did not appear in court to contest the charges against him, the judge ordered him to pay $113.5 million in compensation to Janet's parents in May 2000. Janet's parents traveled back to Mexico to confront Perry and requested to meet his children. He firmly refused their request, prompting them to return to Nashville. A month later, they returned to Mexico with a court order and assistance from local police, who arrested Perry for violating his visa. Although the charges were eventually dropped, by the time Perry got back home, his children were missing. Taking advantage of Perry's absence, Janet's parents took the children to the U.S. and sought permanent custody once they were home. This led to a direct confrontation and sparked another legal battle for custody. Ultimately, Perry regained custody, and Janet's parents were reprimanded for unlawfully taking the children. Later, the Tennessee Court of Appeals overturned Perry's manslaughter conviction. At this point, Perry believed he could lead a stable life in Mexico with his new wife and children, feeling confident that nothing would disrupt his plans. However, unexpected developments were on the horizon, as the local police department, along with 2 investigators, continued to actively investigate Janet's case. In the latter half of 2004, the prosecutor's office introduced new evidence that led to a retrial, during which 59 witnesses were heard. This resulted in charges against Perry for second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. In October 2005, an arrest warrant and a request for extradition to the United States were issued for Perry. While being transported, Perry was accompanied by Pat Postiglione, one of the detectives involved in the investigation. During the journey, Perry was quite talkative and asked the detective whether he could face murder charges if an accident occurred. He also told Pat that he would be willing to confess everything if he could receive a sentence of no more than 7 years. The detective stated that he would pass this information on to the district attorney. Janet's parents were determined not to allow Perry to enjoy a new life after spending a short time in prison. They submitted a new petition for custody of the children, which the judge approved. Facing difficulties in the legal system, Perry sought another solution. He attempted to persuade his cellmate, Russell Ferris, to kill Janet's parents. Russell became interested in the plan and learned that Perry's father, Arthur, would act as the intermediary. After 2 months of discussions among the three, Russell's lawyer notified the police about Perry's offer to kill Janet's parents. From that point on, Perry's situation became increasingly complicated. Initially, the evidence against Perry for murder was weak and mostly circumstantial. His lawyer argued that there was no solid proof that Perry had committed the crime. If he had been found not guilty, he could not be tried again for the same offense. However, the situation changed dramatically with the discovery of a murder-for-hire plot involving Janet's parents. Now, the police had recorded conversations revealing details of the planned murder, including statements made by both Perry and his father, Arthur. When Arthur listened to the recordings, he realized his errors and agreed to testify against his son in exchange for a more lenient sentence. The disturbing truth emerged. Arthur, Perry's father, revealed that his son had confessed to him about killing Janet. A few weeks after the murder, Perry sought his father's help because he was anxious about the body being discovered. He asked Arthur to help hide it. One night, they drove to a location where, according to Arthur, the body was already decomposing and stored in a bag. Arthur recounted loading the remains into Perry's Jeep. They then traveled north to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where they stayed at a motel. Under the cover of darkness, Arthur attempted to dispose of the body. He looked for a body of water deep enough to conceal the remains but was unable to find one before sunrise. Eventually, he located a suitable spot. Arthur later attempted to guide investigators to the location where he had hidden the body, but he couldn't specify the exact spot. However, both the police and the jury believed his account of the incident. According to Arthur, after Perry killed Janet, her body remained in their home for some time, wrapped in a rug. Unfortunately for Arthur, his confession did not yield the leniency he had hoped for, and he died just months later while incarcerated. Perry faced a much harsher fate. He was convicted of second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, theft, and conspiracy to commit murder, resulting in a 56-year prison sentence. He is currently incarcerated at the Morgan County Correctional Complex, where he assists fellow inmates with their legal appeals in the prison law library. He will be eligible for parole in 2038. Tragically, Janet's remains have never been found. At around 4 p.m. on Friday, April 15, 2011, in Lorgues, France, 27-year-old Alexander Durand was on his way home when he received a call from his younger sister, Séverine. She was a high school student, and the siblings had a close relationship, often calling each other. However, today she called not to share good news or weekend plans. Instead, she informed him that their mother, Colette, had not picked her up after school as she usually did. The day before, Séverine had been with their father, who had taken her to school in the morning. She had tried calling their mother multiple times, but her calls went unanswered. This was unusual because their mother was normally very responsible, and there was no reason for her not to come and pick up her daughter. Séverine was worried that something might have happened, such as an accident. She advised Alexander to check the situation and visit their mother's house. Alexander was also worried, so he called his mother several times, but received no response. Finally, he decided to visit his mother's house himself. When Alexander arrived, Séverine was already there, but she was still very anxious, even more than before. She was in the house with the gendarmes, and what they discovered was very concerning. Colette's car was parked in the driveway, the doors were unlocked, and the keys were in the ignition. 52-year-old Colette had vanished without a trace. The keys to the house were also in the car, so Alexander took them and went inside to see what was happening. The house was completely empty, as if she had simply disappeared. The gendarmes quickly began their search for Colette since the situation was becoming increasingly alarming. Initially, they suspected a robbery, but they found that nothing was stolen from the house. The doors and windows were untouched. In the back seat of the car, they discovered Colette's purse, which held all her identification, bank cards, and cash. She could not have left willingly without those items. Tension heightened. Even after 3 hours of searching, there was still no news. Both the house and the car were thoroughly examined, but no leads emerged. As a result, the search area was expanded to include the outskirts of the town. None of the neighbors had seen anything out of the ordinary, no suspicious noises or activity near Colette's home. To learn more about her, the police interviewed her relatives. Colette, a divorced mother of 4, was known for her reserved and calm demeanor. She was not someone who would spontaneously disappear. She had no mental health issues or addictions. At the time, Colette was working as a supermarket manager. She was polite, punctual, and a devoted mother. Everyone who knew her was confused and did not understand what had happened, as she had no troubling relationships and no history of violence. The evidence suggested that Colette's disappearance was not accidental. The police believed that whoever was involved in this incident was someone she was very familiar with. At the very least, Colette had allowed this person into her house or had given them the right to enter. After investigating, the police identified the primary suspect. She lived by herself in a small 2-story house. To save on expenses, she rented the first floor to a man named Bernard. During his interview, Bernard made some strange and unsettling remarks. He speculated on how Colette might have been abducted, suggesting that she could have been struck on the back of the head, rendering her unable to call for help. He also provided a detailed account of her medical condition, noting that she was diabetic and needed urgent assistance to avoid serious health consequences. His level of knowledge about Colette raised suspicions among the police. Furthermore, Colette's son, Alexander, revealed that Bernard was in love with his mother, which could explain his insight into her behavior and routines. This revelation increased suspicions, as Bernard could potentially have a motive. Alexander noted that, despite Bernard's interest, his mother did not reciprocate and had no intention of developing anything beyond friendship. She was solely focused on her children and her work, completely dismissing the idea of a romantic relationship with Bernard. When detectives investigated Bernard's background, they found that he had a criminal history. In 1999, he assaulted his girlfriend with a weapon after she tried to end their relationship. His ex described him as very hot-tempered and unable to control his rage. As a result of these incidents, suspicions about Bernard increased. Colette's lack of interest may have caused him to become angry, and what happened next remains unclear. In 1999, Bernard received a brief 6-year prison sentence for an attack, mainly because the girl he attacked survived. Now, he was called to the police station for questioning as the primary suspect in Colette's disappearance. The police were trying to determine when Colette went missing, and Bernard claimed to have useful information. He reported that on the afternoon of April 14, 2011, while watching television, he heard noises coming from the 2nd floor, where Colette had lived. He could hear footsteps on the wooden floor, but then everything went quiet. He did not see Colette leave, making it likely that he was the last person to have seen her. However, the police were concerned about Bernard's behavior. He was unable to recall the exact time of the noises or even remember what show he was watching, raising further suspicions. Bernard's main problem was that he didn't have a verifiable alibi. However, there was no evidence against him, so the police had to let him go. The next morning, officers came to inspect his house. Bernard greeted them with shouts and was initially unwilling to let them enter. Eventually, he agreed to show them around the 1st floor of the rented property but continued to make odd comments. Notably, he pointed out a hatch that led to the basement. He remarked that if he had killed someone, he would have hidden the body there, yet he insisted he was innocent and claimed the basement was empty. Upon inspection, there was indeed no one there. Meanwhile, when law enforcement searched Colette's home, they discovered suspicious stains believed to be washed blood, but this could not be confirmed. Despite the lack of evidence, suspicion remained around Bernard. Deciding to keep a close watch on him, the detectives sought to establish the exact time of Colette's disappearance, but clues were scarce. She had been alone for several days with minimal contact with her neighbor until April 15th. Anything could have happened during that time. Investigators began to piece together her movements, partly based on Bernard's statement that he had heard loud noises from the floor above on April 14th, the day before she vanished. As the investigators looked into the case, they realized that no one had seen Colette since April 15th. They managed to locate her friend, who stated that he had last seen Colette on April 14th around 3:30 p.m. at a gathering with mutual friends. He mentioned that after leaving the party, she got into her car intending to drive to Draguignan but planned to stop at home first. This was the only information available and was considered a starting point for the investigation, as more than 40 hours had passed since she went missing. Communicating with Colette's friend helped them determine a rough timeline for when she went missing. In her car, investigators found not only her personal belongings but also her mobile phone. They began analyzing the phone to see whom Colette had communicated with in the hours leading up to her disappearance. Notably, there was a call that lasted about 40 seconds, made shortly before 3:30 p.m. The call was from Sylviane Fabre, Colette's ex-husband's sister. Sylviane was contacted, and she stated that she had met Colette during Colette's marriage to her brother. At that time, Colette's relationship with her husband was not very good, so they decided to separate. However, afterward, the former spouses and their families managed to maintain friendly relations. Sylviane mentioned that back in 2008, they collaborated with Colette to invest money in a joint business. Shortly before Colette's disappearance, the business partners had a small conflict regarding these assets, but Sylviane claimed that everything was resolved, and they continued to work together. Together, Sylviane and Colette created a real estate company that generated a substantial income, which provided Sylviane with a potential motive. Not only were they distant relatives, but they also had shared finances and property, which can often lead to such conflicts. Naturally, Sylviane denied any wrongdoing. Colette's daughter mentioned that Sylviane often had conflicts regarding their joint activities. They could argue and reconcile several times a day. However, Colette's daughter described all these disputes as minor issues that were resolved quickly. The gendarmes checked Sylviane's schedule for the last few days. She had an alibi confirmed by her son. For almost the entire duration of the investigation, suspicions against Sylviane were not substantiated, and the search operation again hit a dead end. On April 17, 2011, the prosecutor's office began a judicial investigation into the disappearance of Colette. With no leads left and all suspicious individuals cleared as unlikely suspects, there was no option but to notify the media and hope, with their assistance, to obtain new witnesses who might have noticed something. At a recent press conference, officials announced that while there were priority leads in the criminal investigation, no suspects had been identified. This news sparked significant interest among journalists, as the case could potentially involve themes of business, money, love, or betrayal. Consequently, rumors began circulating about Colette immediately, some of which were quite alarming. Her information, background, and photos quickly became prominent in newspapers and on television. Her children expressed their desire to see her again and shared how difficult her absence was for them. The most concerning aspect was that the critical 48-hour window for finding her alive had already passed, significantly diminishing the chances of a successful rescue. While the prosecutor's office hoped to gather new leads from the public through the media, the police were actively searching the nearby villages. Following the press conference, the search area was widened, and a special investigative unit took over the case. Colette's disappearance began to attract national attention. The media frenzy intensified as they attempted to connect her case with another notorious crime that had recently shaken France. A few days before Colette went missing in early April 2011, 5 members of the Dupont de Ligonnès family, including the wife and 4 children, were found murdered under the terrace of their home in Nantes. The head of the family, Xavier, disappeared shortly after the murders, having been spotted on the outskirts of the city on April 15. Authorities believe Xavier was responsible for the crime, and he was placed on a nationwide wanted list. Notably, the location of the massacre was only 30 kilometers from Colette's home. The media quickly linked these incidents together. The timing coincided with Colette's likely disappearance, raising the possibility that Xavier kidnapped her. An even stranger coincidence was that the Dupont de Ligonnès family lived in a house that Colette had sold in 1992. Xavier was viewed as a respectable citizen, a devoted husband, and a caring father who was engaged in his community and known for his honesty and fairness. However, it later emerged that Xavier was deep in debt at the time he murdered his family. Just days before the killings, he purchased cement, tools, and 4 bags of lime, suggesting he had a motive and was preparing for the crime. Journalists speculated that Xavier may have had a grudge against Colette, but the reason for his potential revenge remained unclear. Rumors spread quickly, with theories ranging from a fraudulent real estate deal to unrequited love. Others suspected it could be part of a planned escape. Xavier could have taken Colette so they could be together again. Witnesses came forward, claiming they had seen Xavier's car near her home. Some even reported seeing him stop in town on April 14th. Although these accounts seemed unlikely, detectives noticed clear connections between Xavier and Colette. This led them to investigate the possibility that the two had escaped together. Consequently, Colette shifted from being seen as a victim to potentially being viewed as an accomplice in crimes that might have involved Xavier's family. However, friends and family of Colette quickly disputed this theory, asserting that she was not capable of cruelty. As detectives explored new leads that emerged almost daily, they became convinced that there was no romantic or conspiratorial link between Xavier and Colette. They began to feel that the similarities between Xavier and Colette were merely coincidental or tragic coincidences. To definitively eliminate this theory, they decided to examine both Xavier's and Colette's mobile phones. They encountered a challenge. Xavier's phone could not be tracked, and there were no calls or messages from Colette's phone to his. After their investigation, they found no evidence of any contact between the two after the sale of the house. Although the theory regarding Xavier was intriguing, it ultimately consumed valuable police time and resources. 3 weeks after Colette's disappearance, any possible link to Xavier was dismissed. Xavier himself was never found, leaving the French police at an impasse. The case has reached a dead end and will not make any progress until at least May 15, 2011. On this day, about 30 kilometers from Lorgues, 2 tourists were returning from a forest hike and taking photos. While using a remote path to capture some scenic shots, they were hit by a strong, unpleasant smell coming from the side of the path. One of the tourists decided to investigate the source of the odor. As the woman approached a pile of stones, the smell intensified and became unbearable. When she moved one of the stones, she discovered a leg protruding from beneath the rocks. The tourists quickly called the police. Within minutes, gendarmes arrived at the location and found the body of a woman in an advanced state of decomposition, making it difficult to determine her gender. Only her clothing provided a clue. The police attempted to identify the victim but were initially unsuccessful. They took photographs of her clothes, accessories, and jewelry, which were then shown to the families of various women who had gone missing in the area. Among those families were the children of Colette. Her daughter and son recognized their mother based on what she was wearing. Although the gendarmes believed they had identified Colette a month after her disappearance, they chose to wait for more conclusive evidence. DNA analysis was necessary to confirm family ties, as appearance alone could not provide definitive proof. Ultimately, the examination verified the police's suspicions. The body was indeed identified as Colette Durand. On May 17, 2011, an autopsy was conducted on the body that had been found at the Forensic Medical Institute. Unfortunately, the condition of the remains was so poor that the exact cause of death could not be determined. The forensic expert did confirm that Colette had not been abused before her death, but it did not help the police make much progress in the case. As a result, the investigation into her disappearance shifted focus to a murder investigation. On June 9, 2011, Colette's body was buried. Law enforcement officers attended the funeral, knowing that criminals sometimes show up at such events to witness the impact of their actions. Some may seek to relive their emotions, while others might derive satisfaction from seeing the grief of the victim's family. Several officers remained in vehicles, while others blended in with the attendees, discreetly observing the proceedings. During this time, the police noted that Sylvian, Colette's business partner and sister-in-law, was missing from the funeral. Although Sylvian and Colette were close, Sylvian's absence raised suspicions. This concern increased a few days later when Sylvian attempted to end her life. Although she survived with minor injuries and poisoning, her actions were alarming. When the police arrived after a call from Sylvian's neighbor, they found Sylvian lying on her couch at home. She was unable to fully express herself, so she was taken to a medical center for assistance. However, The officers did not leave empty-handed. They discovered a lengthy letter addressed to her son, David Perel, which was several pages long. While the letter did not contain explicit confessions regarding her actions concerning Colette, the detectives interpreted it as a potential admission of guilt prior to her death. The police decided to speak with David, and he provided new insights into the troubled relationship between Sylvian and Colette. He believed that shortly before Colette's death, she and Sylvian had experienced a serious conflict related to their shared business. Intrigued, the detectives asked David to recount his activities on April 14th. He described the daytime as uneventful, but his account of the evening was much more compelling. On April 14th, at around 10 p.m., Sylvian asked David to drive her to Colette's house to discuss some important business matters. Her own car was broken, so she turned to him for help. However, on their way, his car also broke down a few kilometers from home. Despite the rain, they decided to walk back instead. He took the car battery with them, and together they returned in an attempt to fix the car. On the night Colette disappeared, this mother and son spent hours in the rain attempting to repair a car left outside the city. The gendarmes suspected that David was trying to create a questionable alibi to explain his absence from home. This suspicion was further fueled by Sylvian's initial statement to the detectives, in which she claimed she had spent the previous days at home. It seemed implausible that she could forget such a significant event. When Sylvian regained consciousness in the medical center, her account of the events changed. Her new story mirrored what her son had previously told, including all the important details. The gendarmes decided to investigate her claims. They found that on the night of April 14th to 15th, there was no rain in the area. Additionally, it was odd that Sylvian and her son were unable to flag down a passing car for a ride home. Why did they walk so far while carrying a battery with them? The road's vehicle monitoring system revealed that approximately 5 cars passed by during the time they were walking home. It seemed unlikely that none of these drivers would have stopped to assist them in the rain. This raised suspicions that David and Sylvian were hiding something and might be involved in the death of Colette. Unfortunately, there was no physical evidence to support these suspicions. As a result, the decision was made to keep a close watch on them over the next few months. Their phone calls were monitored, and on February 8, 2012, this surveillance yielded important information. The police intercepted a conversation between Sylvian and Bernard, who was Colette's neighbor. It became clear that Bernard knew much more than he had initially revealed. On April 14th, he not only heard sounds coming from above but also saw Sylvian's car arrive at the house, indicating he was aware of her actions. David, Sylvian's son, was also involved, as he was driving for his mother. On February 20th, 2012, David and Sylvian were arrested. Detectives viewed David as the weak link. During questioning, he quickly confessed, seeming relieved to unburden himself of his guilt. He revealed that on April 14th, they arrived at Colette's home around 3:30 p.m. Afterward, Sylvian lured her into a barn behind the house. A business dispute led to further conflict, during which Sylvian attacked Colette, beating her to the ground. Then, she took a rope from the barn and began to strangle Colette in front of David. Although he did not intervene or participate in the attack, he admitted to helping move the body afterward. They left Colette's body on the property, covering it with a tarpaulin. In the evening, when they fabricated the story about the broken car, they took the body out of town. David assisted Sylvian in dragging the deceased away from the road and covering her with stones. Despite David's confession, Sylvian denied any wrongdoing. She claimed the death was accidental and that they hid the body out of fear of the police. However, it was puzzling how well prepared she seemed for the crime, as she had latex gloves that prevented her from leaving fingerprints. After being detained for 48 hours, Sylvian was charged with murder, while David was released. Though he was viewed as an accomplice, his testimony needed verification, so he remained under judicial supervision. The next step was to determine the motive. It turned out that the motive was linked to financial issues. Sylvian's business was on the brink of failure when Colette uncovered that Sylvian was embezzling money from clients. Another possible motive was jealousy, as Colette was thriving while Sylvian's problems continued to grow. Shortly before the tragedy, Sylvian had gone through a painful divorce, and one of her 2 sons had been convicted of violence. Communication between her and David had nearly ceased, and his involvement in the crime marked the end of their close relationship. On January 21, 2014, David was charged in court with the murder of Colette. He claimed that he was only an accomplice and that he helped hide the body due to pressure from his mother. Sylvian, his mother, argued that the incident was an act of involuntary manslaughter. She explained that she had lost her temper after a conflict with her business partner, Colette, who was trying to take everything from her. Facing life in prison, Sylvian sought to downplay her guilt. The prosecutor's office looked into the role of the tenant, Bernard. Although he witnessed the conflict between Sylvian and Colette, he did not report it because he feared Sylvian. Ultimately, he testified as a witness for the prosecution. On January 23, 2014, the jury found Sylvian Fabre guilty of manslaughter, sentencing her to 30 years in prison. Bernard was acquitted, and David Perel received a 3-year suspended sentence. Over the years, Colette's children struggled to understand what had happened in that barn with their mother. Despite the complicated trial, they felt uncertain that the entire truth had been uncovered. They were unhappy with the court's verdict, believing that Sylvian had committed premeditated murder but had received a lenient sentence. Additionally, they felt Bernard was more involved than he had admitted and had evaded responsibility for the crime. The case of Colette Durand is a tragic and mysterious story that leaves many unanswered questions for her family and the community. Colette, a devoted mother, suddenly disappeared, leading to a lengthy investigation filled with suspicions of love, money, and betrayal. Ultimately, the truth was revealed through David's confession and Sylvian's sentencing, but was justice truly served? Bernard, the neighbor with a murky past, remains a significant question mark as he evades all charges. For Colette's children, the pain lies not only in losing their mother but also in the feeling that the secrets surrounding their mother's death may be buried forever. Judy Anderson did not come to work on the morning of December 26, 2007. She worked at the post office with her friend Linda Thiele, who had known her for many years. They communicated regularly and spent time together on weekends. Judy was known for being a responsible employee who rarely missed shifts without a valid reason. However, that day was different. Linda requested time off from work and went to Judy's house at 9 a.m. to check on her. When Linda arrived, no one was home at that time. As she approached the house, she noticed both of Judy's family cars parked outside, but the house appeared empty. When Linda knocked on the front door, there was no response. After knocking more firmly and checking the door, she discovered it was unlocked, which struck her as odd given the house's outward appearance. Upon entering, she was met by a strange and unpleasant smell. She tried to call family members, but no one answered. As she walked through the first floor and past the basement, she noticed something unusual below. Entering the dark basement, she spotted a man lying on the floor and initially thought he had suffered from carbon monoxide poisoning. As she approached him, she realized he had been shot. In the dim light, she discerned that there were several more bodies in the basement. Since she lacked her mobile phone, she used the family's home phone to call emergency services, 911, to report that she had found 3 bodies in Judy's home. Police arrived at the scene at around 9:30 a.m. and quickly realized that the tragedy was much worse than Linda had anticipated. In the basement, they discovered a couple and their 2 young children, all of whom had been attacked in the head. The small town of Carnation, Washington, was known for its peaceful atmosphere, making the horrific events of that day particularly shocking and ruining Christmas for the community. Around 11 a.m., while forensic teams were working at the scene, Michelle, the daughter of Wayne and Judy, arrived with her boyfriend, Joseph Thomas McEnroe, and attempted to access their trailer. The police needed to speak with them, but from the start, detectives noted their odd behavior. Although the area was clearly marked as a crime scene, neither Michelle nor Joseph seemed to care about the situation, nor did they ask about their family members. This indifference was particularly striking given Michelle's suspicious demeanor. Joseph appeared more vulnerable, nervously confessing to the family's murder from the outset. He expressed genuine remorse, crying and calling himself a monster. Eventually, Michelle also broke down and confessed her role in the murders. Both agreed to cooperate with the investigation, leading detectives to seek the murder weapon. They directed law enforcement to where they had disposed of 2 weapons in a nearby river. When you got there, a team of divers had recovered crucial evidence, which had been sent to the laboratory for analysis. The ballistic tests confirmed that these were the weapons used in the killings. Investigators were left to ponder what had driven such a tragic event within the family. Wayne was known for his ambition. He had been working hard to obtain a good education and build a career, and his dreams had started to come to fruition. After experiencing an unsuccessful first relationship, he was in the process of establishing his personal life. Then Wayne met Judy, whom he later referred to as his soulmate, and together they built a loving family that they cherished. By 2007, they had been happily married for 31 years and were living on their farm. From the start, Judy had dreamed of a family and a joyful marriage, and Wayne was the partner who helped her achieve that. Their home was in the small, close-knit town of Carnation, near Seattle, where everyone knew their family well. They enjoyed friendly relationships with their neighbors, often celebrating holidays together and hosting barbecues. The holiday weekend in December 2007 promised to be just as festive. Over their 30 years of marriage, Judy and Wayne had 3 children, Mary, Scott, and Michelle. At that time, Mary lived in the nearby town of North Bend. She left her family a few years ago to focus on her career. Unfortunately, her progress at work was minimal, and she became ill before the vacation. As a result, she decided to visit her family at a later date once she felt better. Scott Anderson was 32 years old and married to his wife, Erica, who was also 32. Although Scott concentrated heavily on his career, his personal life was stable. The couple had 2 children, 5-year-old Olivia and 3-year-old Nathan. They lived in another nearby town, about a half-hour drive from his parents, and he was a dedicated husband and father. He worked as a builder, while Erica stayed home to manage the household and care for the children. Michelle Anderson was 29 years old and had always been different from her peers, often for negative reasons. She was known as a difficult and argumentative child, and as she grew up, she struggled to find success in her career. Many people in the community see her as a problematic member of the family. However, her brother and sister, Mary and Scott, support her, while their parents hope she will change for the better in the future. Michelle had several unsuccessful relationships, the latest being with her boyfriend, Joseph Thomas McEnroe, who was also 29. They dated for about 5 years. They met on a dating site and quickly moved in together, but they faced challenges in finding stable housing due to their lack of education and the absence of steady jobs. In 2004, they rented a mobile home, which was their only option for affordable living at the time. Neighbors considered them lazy and often referred to them as losers. Michelle and Joseph rarely ventured outside their trailer and generally avoided interactions with others, feeling uncomfortable even during brief conversations. Minor issues, such as a car parked incorrectly in front of their home, could trigger Michelle's anger, leading her to argue loudly, as if she were looking for an opportunity to express herself. People also noticed Michelle's unusual behavior. During episodes of unpredictable aggression, she would suddenly break down but then quickly calm down, which raised concerns about her mental health. Some suggested that she see a psychiatrist. At nearly every meeting with new people, Michelle would bring up money, telling elaborate stories about how she and her family were wealthy, though for some reason, she didn't use that wealth. However, both Michelle and Joseph often appeared unkempt. Many described them as dirty and disheveled, which led others to avoid them. Michelle was very controlling of Joseph, often speaking for him. She considered herself the black sheep of her family, insisting that despite her perceived differences, she was superior to the rest of them. This attitude negatively affected family relationships, leading to frequent conflicts. When she wasn't making up stories about their family's wealth, she would recount how strict her parents were. She often portrayed her childhood as bleak, depicting her father as abusive and her mother as hypocritical. According to her, home life was so unbearable that it pushed her to run away and live independently. Despite the tensions within the family, neighbors often saw Judy visiting her daughter, Michelle, once a month. During these visits, Judy would bring bags of food to help her daughter. She was polite, calm, and friendly, but she never admitted to the allegations of abusing Michelle. In contrast, Michelle would often be rude and yell at her mother, despite her mother's kindness. One of Michelle and Joseph's friends said that their trailer home was very difficult to live in and unfit for habitation. The trailer was in poor condition, with minimal furniture and many broken appliances. Many of the windows were damaged and had been covered with opaque material, barely letting in any light. Michelle mentioned that the windows were covered for privacy, as she did not want outsiders to see into the home. When asked why, she claimed that the neighbors were spying on them and that there had been attempts to break into the trailer when they were away. Michelle reported these incidents to the police, but nothing was found, even with several security cameras nearby. Neighbors were skeptical of her claims, suggesting that no one would want to break in, as there was hardly anything valuable inside, leading them to believe Michelle might have made up the stories to gain attention. The relationship between Michelle and Joseph seemed unusual. Michelle viewed herself as a spiritual mentor, trying to guide Joseph on how to live a good life, but few took her advice seriously. This led to frequent arguments between them. After struggling to pay their land rent, they had to move their trailer. Unable to afford a proper home, they returned to her parents' farm, where her parents offered them shelter. They arrived on December 24, 2007, just before Christmas. Michelle's family had planned a holiday gathering with close friends. Her parents, Judy, aged 61, and Wayne, aged 60, wanted to bring everyone together. Scott, along with his wife and 2 young children, planned to attend the family reunion, while Mary was unable to make it home. While waiting for the guests, Joseph and Michelle stayed in their trailer. It was likely that another conflict occurred, leading to them getting into a quarrel. Unexpectedly, around 4 p.m., they left their trailer carrying guns. Judy was in the backyard wrapping Christmas presents and preparing for guests when Joseph started chatting with her. Meanwhile, Michelle silently approached from behind, armed with a gun. Inside the house, Wayne was reading a newspaper and noticed the situation. Suddenly, Joseph grabbed the weapon and attacked Wayne in the head, killing him instantly. Shortly after, Judy was attacked 3 times. Taking advantage of the chaos, Michelle and Joseph dragged the bodies to the barn behind the house. It was only when the noise drew the attention of neighbors, who lived far away, that the gravity of the situation became clear. Michelle and Joseph quickly cleaned up the blood and tried to erase any evidence of the crime because they had less than an hour before Scott and his family were expected to arrive at around 5 p.m. Soon after, the Scott family arrived, expecting to celebrate Christmas. They were puzzled when Judy and Wayne were not there to greet them, as they were usually caring and eager for their grandchildren's arrival. Michelle explained that they had gone grocery shopping and would be back soon. Unaware of the danger, they went into the living room and didn't notice that their parents' cars were parked outside. As soon as Scott, Michelle's brother, settled onto the sofa, Joseph confronted him. Michelle pulled out the weapon and attacked Scott multiple times in the head, killing him instantly. Erica, 30 years old, stood up in shock but managed to escape with the children. Michelle and Joseph attacked them but missed several times, then ran out of ammunition. While Michelle and Joseph were reloading the gun, Erica managed to lock herself in a room and called 911 at 5:13 p.m. En hung that kong may, nai kai ko vua ket noi toi tong dai, Joseph de zong veo fom. Erica pleaded with Joseph not to harm the children, but he attacked her in the head and took her phone, smashing it against the wall. This horrifying scene unfolded in front of the terrified children, who were clinging to her. Joseph fired the shot, mistakenly believing that Erica would call for help. Her final cries were recorded as evidence. A police patrol was dispatched, and soon, officers arrived at Judy's home. Michelle greeted them by locking the gate right in front of them. She reluctantly spoke to the officers, insisting that everything was fine and refusing them entry. Unable to access the house, the police had no choice but to leave. When Michelle and Joseph were arrested, they attempted to justify their violent actions. Michelle claimed she was angry at her parents and brother. She stated that Scott owed her a significant amount of money, which he had refused to repay despite her repeated requests over the years. When Michelle sought support from her parents regarding this issue, they ignored her, which fueled her resentment. Additionally, she mentioned enduring physical and emotional abuse from her father for many years. Just before the murder, her mother pressured her to pay rent, expressing frustration over her living situation in a trailer on their farm. However, nobody believed Michelle's claims. Their acquaintances knew that Joseph and Michelle were not in a position to lend money. They only had small amounts, like $3 to $5, while Scott was financially stable and didn't need loans. Additionally, it was hard to believe that their parents, knowing about their financial struggles, would demand rent. Wayne and Judy are hospitable people who have welcomed Michelle and Joseph, provided them with food, and never asked for money in return. Michelle felt that nobody believed her, so she began to change her story. She tried to portray herself as the victim. In her final version, she claimed that her motive for murdering 6 people was jealousy over Scott's success and his relationships with his family and at work, as well as envy of her parents. However, this reasoning does not justify the murder of Olivia and Nathan, young children who had no understanding of the situation and were not responsible for their parents' actions. Michelle argued that her actions were an act of mercy, believing that her nephews would face a harsh world without their parents and that she wanted to spare them from that life. She was also annoyed by the presence of the children while their parents were being attacked. During an interview, Michelle described how she felt humiliated and oppressed by her parents, fabricating increasingly dramatic stories. Even the recorded confession took over 2 hours, detailing the sequence of the attack. On December 2, 2007, Michelle Anderson and Joseph Thomas McEnroe were charged with 6 counts of premeditated murder. At the time, the legal environment in the state made the case particularly high profile. In another interview, Michelle stated that she wished to be executed, as she found the thought of spending the rest of her life in prison to be a harsher punishment than death. Despite her wishes, the death penalty was not imposed. After the trials, both were sentenced to 6 life terms without the possibility of parole. After the change of governor, the death penalty issue was reconsidered. On September 5, 2013, the Washington State Supreme Court overturned the earlier ruling, leading to a new trial. Michelle was frightened and quickly retracted her previous statements. In January 2015, Joseph appeared in court. His defense claimed he was coerced into committing the crime. They portrayed Michelle as a manipulative individual who had brainwashed Joseph and turned him against her family. They also mentioned his mental illness, which made him susceptible to manipulation. They described Joseph's childhood as tragic and noted that he had been abused by his mother. During his defense, he argued that he had ensured Judy's family died quickly so they would not suffer and attempted to rationalize the killing of the children as an act of mercy. On March 25, 2015, the jury found Joseph guilty of the charges against him. During sentencing, Joseph acted as if he were a victim of manipulation, even modifying his behavior. The prosecutor pointed this out and warned that Joseph was trying to influence the jury's decision by changing how he behaved and spoke. Since the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict on the death penalty, Joseph was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for each murder. 8 years later, in January 2016, Michelle appeared in court once again. The prosecutor's office decided not to pursue the death penalty for her, as Joseph had already received a life sentence. State law requires that all criminals with similar levels of guilt receive equal justice, which applied to both Joseph and Michelle. Therefore, seeking a lesser penalty for Michelle would have been unlawful. After hearing this news, Michelle became emotional and expressed her regret for the crime she had committed. The prosecutor suggested that her tears were motivated by her desire to avoid spending the rest of her life in prison and to obtain a more lenient sentence. The prosecution highlighted that Michelle had repeatedly mentioned financial motives or money-related reasons to justify her actions. It appeared that her main motivation for the crime was to inherit her parents' house. According to the prosecutor, Michelle remained the same ruthless person, and her fluctuating testimonies and blatant lies made her untrustworthy. She accused her family of harsh treatment during the investigation. However, there was no evidence to support her claims. She seemed to be attempting to undermine her family as if the murders alone were not enough to portray herself more favorably. During the trial, new claims emerged. Michelle maintained that she hated Erica just like everyone else did, but she asserted that this hatred stemmed from Erica taking her brother, Scott, away from her. Nevertheless, their already strained relationship indicated that Michelle was lying again. Ultimately, the probable reason for her murder was simply jealousy. During the trial, the jury listened to witness testimonies presented by the prosecution over several weeks. The Supreme Court hearing mirrored the earlier trial of Joseph, who was already in prison. The proceedings were formal. Michelle's older sister, Mary, was among those who spoke. She had been unable to attend a family Christmas gathering due to illness. Later, Mary expressed gratitude for missing the holiday, believing it had saved her life. Michelle confessed that she had been planning the crime against her family for about 10 weeks. However, both she and Joseph made several mistakes, failing to cover their tracks or dispose of the bodies properly. Their claim of getting married in Las Vegas was quickly proven to be false. Despite her emotional confessions, Michelle's true character emerged when she received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. She reacted by screaming at the judge and threatening to sue for poor legal representation. Michelle even demanded to be released so she could hire her own private lawyer, but her request was denied, leading her to accuse the judge of violating her constitutional rights. At present, both Michelle and Joseph are incarcerated in state prisons. The legal process has been lengthy, emotional, and costly, with numerous appeals and strong opposition from their defense teams. The struggle for a lighter sentence continued for years. The prosecutor spent approximately $2 million on the case for both Michelle and Joseph, while Joseph's defense cost around $5 million and Michelle's expenses were even higher. The only consolation for those who financed the legal battle was knowing that these dangerous individuals would never be free again. Kathleen West was born on February 15, 1975, in Tampa, Florida, USA, as the only daughter of Nancy and John Martin. She was raised in a loving environment and her favorite activity was playing with dolls. As a high school teenager, she began her journey into the modeling industry. By the early 2000s, she was making a living as an exotic dancer. However, during this time, Kathleen frequently faced difficulties in her personal life, particularly in navigating unhealthy relationships. Kathleen developed a strong admiration for Marilyn Monroe, trying to emulate the iconic actress in various aspects of her life. However, she also faced struggles similar to Monroe's, such as depression, insecurity, and self-doubt. In response to these challenges, she sought therapy but still found herself overwhelmed by darkness, which led her to seek comfort in alcohol. Her friends and family, including her mother, noted that she sometimes drank alone after parties when everyone else had left. In 2004, during the Super Bowl celebrations, Kathleen met William Jeffrey West, an Army veteran who was 2 years her senior and the son of Carolyn and William West. Known as Jeffrey, he worked as a recruiter in the Army and was instantly drawn to Kathleen's beauty. His efforts to win her heart were successful, and she described him to her friends as the romantic partner of her dreams, the knight she had always hoped to find. Many believe he filled a void in her life and boosted her confidence. After a brief romance that began in 2004, they got married in Las Vegas. Brittany Driesler, who later became friends with them, commented that at first they seemed like an ill-matched couple. However, opposites attract, and Brittany found it hard to believe that someone like Kathleen could fall for Jeffrey. Nonetheless, one thing was clear: they were deeply in love. In 2005, they had a daughter named Logan, affectionately called Lola. From that point on, Kathleen devoted herself to raising her daughter, while Jeffrey took care of their financial needs. During their years together, they got matching tattoos on their wrists that symbolized their enduring love. They often ended their text messages with declarations of love for each other. After being together for 10 years, the family relocated to Calera, Alabama, about 10 miles south of Birmingham, so that Logan could be closer to her grandparents. Jeffrey took a job as a police officer at a local university, while Kathleen focused on being a homemaker and frequently shared updates on social media. A few years later, when a platform for adult content featuring signed models emerged, Kathleen found an opportunity to publish and sell her photos online. This allowed her to showcase a fun side of her personality, often with her husband taking the photographs. Those close to them noticed that Jeffrey did not feel embarrassed or jealous about her new hobby. However, like any relationship, theirs had its challenges. By the end of 2017, Kathleen had successfully undergone breast augmentation surgery, and they enjoyed a peaceful Christmas and New Year surrounded by family. During this time, Jeffrey earned the respect of Kathleen's parents, who welcomed him as part of the family, and Kathleen was equally embraced by his relatives. On Wednesday, January 10, 2018, Nancy and John took Kathleen for a checkup following her recent surgery, and everything seemed normal. 2 days later, on the evening of Friday, January 12, 2018, Kathleen and Jeffrey stopped at the store to buy alcohol after dining out. Security cameras recorded them purchasing a bottle of whiskey and a bottle of absinthe, with Kathleen appearing happy and relaxed. Once they returned home, they continued drinking, and Jeffrey even shared a photo of one of the bottles on social media. As they enjoyed each other's company, Jeffrey took several pictures of Kathleen, who was dressed in a pink bra, colorful panties, and high-heeled shoes. Eventually, a fight broke out between them. Under the influence of alcohol, Jeffrey expressed his frustration about Kathleen spending more time on her phone than interacting with him. In a moment of rage, he grabbed her phone and threw it outside. When Kathleen saw her phone in the street, she went outside to look for it, barefoot and in just her pink bra, completely unaware of the winter cold. At that moment, Jeffrey, heavily intoxicated, picked up a bottle and struck Kathleen on the head, delivering a fatal blow. Realizing she was no longer alive filled him with shock and fear about the consequences of finding a dead body near their home. An Army veteran helped him devise a plan. He staged the scene to look like an accident by placing a bottle of absinthe on Kathleen's broken phone and then went back inside the house, leaving the front door open. The next morning, Saturday, January 13, 2018, a neighbor named Makorsha Purifoy was driving to work when she discovered Kathleen's partially naked body in the street. Terrified, she called emergency services and mentioned seeing someone moving inside Kathleen's house. When paramedics arrived, they found that Kathleen had suffered severe head trauma from a blunt object. Half an hour later, experienced Police Sergeant Mike Melhoff examined the scene and quickly noticed 2 items near Kathleen's body. It appeared that the placement of the phone and the bottle had been staged. Additionally, 2 stains indicated that the body had been moved after the incident. After authorities found Kathleen's body, Jeffrey appeared at the door, claiming that he had been awakened by the sound of police sirens. Shelby County Medical Examiner Lena Evans arrived at the scene after being called by the police. Upon assessing the situation, she agreed with Agent Mike that the arrangement of objects at the scene appeared unusual. When Mike had a brief conversation with Kathleen's husband, Jeffrey, he noticed that Jeffrey seemed cold and detached. Initially, Mike thought this might be due to Jeffrey's personality and profession. Jeffrey explained that around 2 a.m., he had gone to bed because of pain from an old leg injury he sustained while in the Army, leaving his wife to celebrate alone. Although he admitted his memory was unclear due to alcohol, he remembered feeling irritated when his wife kept looking at her phone and throwing the device out of the house. Later, when the authorities informed Jeffrey's parents and Kathleen about the tragic news, they were unaware of the true cause of her death and sought comfort from Jeffrey. Detectives found no clear evidence that Jeffrey had harmed Kathleen and decided to investigate her background instead. On January 14, 2018, a forensic specialist confirmed that Kathleen died from blunt force trauma and noted that the 2-inch wound on the side of her head could not have been caused by an accidental fall, especially since there were no objects nearby that she could have hit. The examination also indicated that Kathleen likely tried to crawl away before dying. In terms of substances, only alcohol was detected in her blood, at levels nearly 3 times the legal driving limit. Toxicology tests of her urine and other fluids revealed that her alcohol level had been even higher at some point that night. The investigation found fingerprints from both Kathleen and Jeffrey at the scene, which was expected since they had spent the night together. As a result, the focus of the investigation shifted to Kathleen's social circle. The investigation gained momentum when detectives discovered Kathleen's active presence on social media, including an adult website. One early theory suggested that a fan may have become obsessed with her, possibly leading to her death. To explore this possibility, the team examined her contacts and followers, but this approach quickly yielded no credible suspects. Meanwhile, Jeffrey accompanied Kathleen's parents, Nancy and John, to the funeral home to assist with the arrangements. While choosing a coffin, John noticed his son-in-law in tears, struggling to cope. At that moment, John felt the pain of Jeffrey, whom he regarded as a son and who had unexpectedly become a widower. As the investigation progressed, the detectives began to view Jeffrey differently than Kathleen's family did. They grew suspicious of his potential jealousy regarding her revealing online posts and decided to question him again about his feelings on the matter. To their surprise, Jeffrey admitted that he had actually assisted her in taking the photos that her many online subscribers viewed and purchased. Notably, Agent Mike observed that Jeffrey seemed emotionally detached throughout this conversation. Detectives identified a contradiction in Jeffrey's account. Security footage revealed that the door was opened hours later than he had claimed, exactly 9 minutes before 2 a.m. on Saturday. To further investigate, they sought a search warrant for Jeffrey's phone. Once granted, investigators discovered an app tracking physical activity, which provided valuable insights. The data showed that after 11 p.m., just 30 minutes after Jeffrey claimed to be in bed, he took 18 steps. Additionally, a review of his messages uncovered arguments between him and Kathleen, including discussions about their declining relationship. However, those close to them argued that this correspondence reflected typical issues in a long-term relationship and insisted that there was no evidence of a crime. With the investigation stalled, detectives revisited the 911 call made by a neighbor, Makorsha Purifoy. They confirmed that the silhouette she saw moving back and forth was indeed Jeffrey, contradicting his claim that he had been awoken by ambulance sirens. This prompted a forensic expert to re-examine the absinthe bottle that had initially caught their attention due to a chip on the bottom, suggesting it had struck something or someone. The discovery of Jeffrey's fingerprints on the bottle, especially in a location that indicated it could have been used as a weapon, significantly changed the direction of the case. As a result, on February 22, 2018, Jeffrey was arrested for the murder of his wife, Kathleen. His bail was set at $500,000, and he maintained his innocence throughout the process. Shortly after his arrest, Agent Sean Lumley held a press conference, but during this challenging time, John and Nancy continued to support their son-in-law. The most vocal supporter was William, Jeffrey's father, who firmly believed in his son's love for his family. Before the trial began, the prosecution offered Jeffrey a plea deal that would result in a minimum sentence and 2 years of supervised release. However, Jeffrey refused to accept any compromise, opting instead to prove his innocence in front of a jury. The trial, overseen by Shelby County Judge Bill Bach, began in mid-November 2020. This case was unique for prosecutors Neil McCoy and Ben Fair because Kathleen's family supported the accused. However, due to the judge's ban on video recording in the courtroom, no audio-visual records were made of the proceedings. Following the prosecution's presentation of the evidence, the defense, led by attorney John Robbins, presented their interpretation of the events. Robbins argued that, despite some disagreements, Kathleen and Jeffrey had never engaged in serious quarrels or made threats of violence. He highlighted correspondence between the spouses that included plans for their evening together and affectionate messages. The defense highlighted that no DNA evidence, including blood or brain tissue, was found on the alcohol bottle, Jeffrey's clothing, or his hands. Additionally, there was no evidence of a fight or struggle inside the house. Addressing the prosecution's claim that Jeffrey appeared unemotional, the defense attorney argued that everyone reacts to stress and trauma differently, that Jeffrey's reaction was influenced by his military training. However, the testimony from Stephen Boudreau, a physician from the Alabama Department of Forensic Medicine, was particularly impactful. When questioned by prosecutor Ben Fair about the likelihood of a serious injury occurring from a fall, Stephen firmly stated that it was virtually impossible. In his conclusion, he mentioned that the object believed to have caused Kathleen's death had a blade but was not sharp. Over the next 4 days, the trial included various testimonies, including one from Kathleen's mother, who stated that her daughter often drank excessively and engaged in risky behavior. On November 20, 2020, Jeffrey was scheduled to testify in his defense but later communicated through his family to the judge that he had chosen to remain silent. Subsequently, the closing arguments from both the prosecution and defense took place around 5 p.m. Before the jury began deliberations, the judge informed them that, in addition to the manslaughter charge, they could also consider the charge of intentional murder as requested by the prosecutor. The defense objected to this and urged the jury to consider the lesser charge of manslaughter. The judge did not accept this request. After nearly 5 hours, around 10 p.m., the jury returned with a verdict, finding Jeffrey guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter. He maintained a calm demeanor, showing no signs of distress or defeat. Before the hearing concluded, the judge revoked Jeffrey's $500,000 bail, ordering that he remain in custody until sentencing. Jeffrey's attorney mentioned that his client was surprised by the verdict and, despite the significant setback, he would continue to strive for his innocence. Prosecutor Neal expressed disappointment at the court's decision. Although the sentencing hearing was initially set for January 11th, it took place nearly a month later, on February 8, 2021. In this trial, Kathleen's mother, Nancy, spoke out once again, calling for mercy for Jeffrey. She described him as a good man. At the same time, Carolyn, Jeffrey's mother, also spoke about the pain their family is facing due to the trial, emphasizing the importance of having a father for Logan. Before the sentencing, Jeffrey read a prepared statement expressing his sadness about missing important milestones in his daughter's life over the past 3 years. He paused, struggling to hold back his emotions, and mentioned how he and Kathleen's family supported each other during this difficult time. He concluded by referring to his wife without naming her, stating that he had lost his best friend. The judge, considering Jeffrey's 21 years of service in the U.S. Army and his clean criminal record, sentenced William Jeffrey West to 16 years in prison, with 3 years already counted as time served while awaiting trial. 3 days later, Carolyn and John gave an interview to a major American publication, where they collectively stated that they felt Jeffrey's trial was unjust. Since then, the grandparents have been sharing custody of their granddaughter, Logan. In January 2022, the Alabama Supreme Court rejected Jeffrey's appeal. Kiana and Ronald Burns got married in 2015 in a luxurious wedding. They organize colorful dances, treat guests to first-class food, and ensure that the celebration has the highest quality of service. At that time, no one could have guessed that years later, their relationship would be ruined. Unfortunately, in the end, their deteriorated relationship culminated not in a breakup but in a tragic crime. Everything happened in Atlanta, the capital of Georgia, USA. Atlanta is a large city with a rich history where culture, industry, and entertainment are well developed. Moreover, the city has pleasant weather, which is why it attracts many tourists and people looking for permanent residence. However, in addition to this, the city is also known for its troubling crime statistics. The crime rate in Atlanta is 2.5 times higher than the national average, and even with frequent crimes, the city was still shocked by the events that unfolded on November 6, 2021. The police received an alarming call reporting that a married couple had been found dead in their home. It turned out that one spouse had killed the other and then taken their own life. Kiana, who was 44 at the time, shot her husband, 40-year-old Ronald Burns, just before 9 p.m. This shocking story deeply affected the public, had a serious impact on those close to Kiana and Ronald's. Their family was heartbroken, but the most affected were their 8 children, who were suddenly left orphaned. Fortunately, all 8 of their children were not at home at the time of the tragedy and did not witness the horrifying scene. Kiana and Ronald were a wealthy and fairly well-known couple who jointly owned several businesses, including a beauty salon and several online schools. Additionally, they led an active social life, frequently posting updates on social media. It seemed as if everything was going well for them. They had a large family, but then this terrible crime occurred. Many people around them could not understand or accept the reasons behind such an act and were shocked by the turn of events. What prompted Kiana to commit such an act? The answer to this question turned out to be quite complex. To begin with, it is worth mentioning Kiana's background. She was born on September 15, 1977, and spent most of her early childhood in Missouri. From a young age, she knew she wanted to succeed in life, so after graduating from high school, she decided to study cosmetology. Once she enrolled, she realized she had made the right choice. She had a real talent for her craft, worked well with her hands, and easily made new connections. Soon after completing her studies, her work was appreciated by the residents of St. Louis. Her business is growing steadily. It developed into one of the most successful beauty salons in St. Louis. By that time, she had opened a second location, had no shortage of clients or employees. Both her business and herself were flourishing. As for her husband, Ronald was born on May 14, 1975. He was tall, had a good physique, and considered himself a successful businessman. During his high school years, Ronald developed an interest in basketball, which played a significant role in his life. He participated in the state championship in 1994, was known as a goal-oriented and competitive player. Perhaps it was this competitive spirit that drove him to seek self-improvement. While Kiana was busy building her career, Ronald turned his attention to multi-level marketing companies and other questionable schemes, believing they would lead him to success. Despite his inclination towards dubious business practices, Ronald was skilled at networking and building beneficial connections. He even began preaching Christianity in a company he founded to expand his reach to the public. In fact, Kiana was not Ronald's first wife. Previously, he was married to a woman named Evies. However, this marriage lacked love. Despite appearing well-groomed and successful, Ronald was unhappy. All his business ventures failed. He had met Evies while trying to deceive her with one of his scams, but fortunately, she refused him. Additionally, at the time he met Evies, Ronald was already involved in another relationship. However, due to fate or perhaps his newfound relationship, cracks began to show in this marriage. In 2016, they participated in a popular reality show, Divorce Court, to address their family issues. Their story was broadcasted, and Ronald attempted to portray himself as an innocent victim of the relationship. However, it was clear to everyone that he was a narcissistic and deceitful individual. In fact, he admitted on camera to cheating on his wife, although it remains unclear with whom. Many believe he was already involved with Kiana at that time. Evies, on her part, claimed that Ronald was irresponsible with money, often spending her funds recklessly, and could not maintain a full-time job. Ultimately, Ronald divorced Evies and quickly entered into a relationship with Kiana. Kiana was of great interest to Ronald because she was a successful careerist. She had an established business by the time they met. Ronald wanted to take part in her success. As for Kiana, she was attracted to Ronald because of his confidence, ability to find and establish useful connections. Both saw each other as ideal partners for creating a successful business, then decided to enter into a relationship, eventually leading to their marriage. On September 13, 2015, they officially became one family. They spared no expense for the celebration, inviting a large number of guests and renting a huge banquet hall. Given that both spouses had enormous egos, it is not surprising that they chose to have such a lavish celebration. From Kiana's side, Ronald appeared as an incredibly successful person who, when joined with her, could truly create something worthwhile. Additionally, Kiana's financial stability and Ronald's experience seemed like a winning combination. However, these expectations were not met. All their business ventures eventually collapsed, except for Kiana's beauty salon. From that moment on, despite Ronald's lack of income, he began to convince everyone around him that he was a successful businessman. His social media posts often portrayed a flattering image that successfully concealed their dire financial situation. Those who feel the need to brag about their success and luxury are often the most insecure individuals. Ronald and Kiana used their luxurious lifestyle to mask their problems, often sharing happy photos together. For example, on May 6, 2020, Kiana posted on Instagram about her husband gifting her a new Maserati Levante. Their posts highlighted how they attended expensive parties, traveled, enjoyed life, with Kiana always impeccably dressed with styled hair and makeup. In turn, Ronald frequently posted about his business endeavors, claiming that everything he took on was successful and profitable. Both spouses, as devout Christians, added quotes from the Bible or other sacred texts to their posts. They also shared photos from their luxurious mansion, showcasing their wealth and family life in detail. However, these images were just a facade. Their family was experiencing significant difficulties. For several years before the events described, Ronald worked for an American marketing insurance company that engaged in fraudulent activities aimed at extorting money from middle and low-income families. In fact, he even tried to involve family members, friends, and parishioners in this scheme to elevate his status within the company. Ronald clearly did not earn enough from this venture to support his family, and his divorce in 2014 revealed that he could not afford even the minimal monthly payments of $250. Unfortunately, instead of acknowledging his financial shortcomings, he believed that all he needed was financial support to get back on his feet. He thought that by using his wife's money, he could promote both himself and her in society. Nothing would deter him from pursuing his goals, even if it involved misusing Kiana's earnings to invest in the business he had always dreamed of. Shortly thereafter, advertisements for his financial consulting firms, called Seafig Ambition and Leg Financial Solutions, appeared on his social networks. The pages contained photos of Ronald and Kiana posing with products and attending conferences and included testimonials from supposedly satisfied clients. Ultimately, these companies were not successful either, as Ronald merely spent Kiana's money to finance ideas that never materialized. It is also important to note that both spouses were not young, carefree individuals but rather had significant obligations. Despite the evidence that Ronald's business was failing and draining their already limited finances, they continued to convince those around them that their new venture was successful, portraying themselves as prosperous entrepreneurs. Their personal image as a successful couple was closely tied to their excessive pride and self-esteem. Their environment did not suspect the true state of affairs, therefore they were ready to do anything to maintain that perception. Additionally, in the comments under their videos on YouTube and on other social networks, people admired their business and their family as a whole. Kiana and Ronald believed that they were about to achieve the financial success they had dreamed of through their efforts, refused to notice or admit the truth. In fact, their arrogance was so strong that they even filmed a series about themselves. All the money that they managed to earn was immediately spent on their supposedly luxurious lifestyle and on the desire to appear to be someone they were not. Such extravagance ultimately led to their near bankruptcy. On December 19, 2019, Ronald filed an official application for Chapter 10 bankruptcy. In this type of bankruptcy, they had to liquidate some of their assets to pay off their debts, resulting in a loss of about $20,000. Although this amount seems significant, their total debt was much greater. During their short marriage, they found themselves mired in nearly $500,000 of debt, which they could not escape. While these troubles unfolded in their lives, Ronald and Kiana continued to pretend that nothing was happening. They maintained the facade of a happy family and successful entrepreneurs, but in reality, this did not help them stay afloat. By this time, they were nothing more than swindlers and liars. To continue this performance, Ronald decided that their family should move to a larger city, hoping he could deceive more people. This turned out to be another misguided and disastrous decision on his part, as Kiana's successful business was still located in their hometown and was the only source of income for the family. Unfortunately, Kiana again agreed to move. In 2021, the Burns family relocated to Atlanta, Georgia. Given their circumstances, any other family in their position would have chosen more modest and economical options for moving, but the Burns family continued to squander money. They rented a luxurious mansion with 5 bedrooms in the wealthy suburb of Sandy Springs. Moreover, they did not disclose on social media that they were renting the house. Instead, they assured their followers that they had bought it, using money earned from their businesses. Now, in addition to cars, clothes, and the fabricated smiles of the Burns family, the mansion was another expensive addition. It was clear that all of Ronald's attempts to stay afloat had suffered another defeat because, in reality, his business ideas had been failures from the start. Meanwhile, Kiana faced challenges in adapting to their new surroundings. She felt completely isolated from her friends and business contacts. Additionally, the relationship in their marriage began to deteriorate sharply. Ronald resumed cheating on Kiana, which further undermined their relationship. In fact, Ronald was primarily interested in her money. At one point, he even published a video on social media in which he lamented the difficulties in his marriage. Although the video was later deleted, it led to a major argument between him and Kiana, nearly resulting in divorce. This revelation shocked their subscribers, but it became clear to everyone what kind of person Ronald was. Upon careful listening, it became apparent that his primary concern was his business and the money he stood to lose along with a divorce. Now that they had neither love nor money left, both were thoroughly disillusioned with each other. Their carefully constructed image began to exert even greater pressure on them. Kiana likely felt that she should have ended the marriage and returned to life without Ronald, but for some reason, she continued to stay with him. After moving to Atlanta and discovering Ronald's infidelity, she also found herself another man. The irony is that despite Ronald's own infidelities, he considered Kiana's betrayal to be unforgivable and filed for divorce. In the documents filed on October 10, 2021, Ronald cited Kiana's infidelity as the reason for the divorce, while their family and friends were completely unaware of it. He concealed the truth from the public. If he were to announce about his wife's infidelity, it would clearly not contribute to his image as a successful person. Kiana, however, did not hide the fact that something was wrong in their marriage. She stopped mentioning her husband on her Facebook page and soon began to post only selfies and videos of herself. Among her posts was a video from a club, making it clear that Kiana was there alone. This was Kiana's most overt statement about the problems in their marriage. On October 20th, 10 days after Ronald filed for divorce, Kiana went live on Facebook to talk about something much more serious. The bright smile she often showed was now replaced by the expression of a worried woman. It became obvious that she was not in the best condition, and many began to worry about her, not without reason. After that day, Kiana's condition worsened dramatically. Just 3 days later, on October 23rd, she wrote on her page, "God is my witness, I would do anything to wake up from this nightmare. God, I need strength." Kiana was on the verge of a nervous breakdown and clearly could no longer stand the hell that surrounded her every day. She was left completely alone in a new city. Her business and family remained in St. Louis. The business she believed in had failed, and besides, the husband in whom she had invested so much no longer loved her. Kiana sincerely believed that there was no way out of this nightmare. Unfortunately, this situation ended in the most terrible way imaginable. On November 6, 2021, the serene silence of the wealthy Sandy Springs area was broken. First, screams were heard from the Burns house, and a little later, shots were fired. The police were alerted soon after one of Ronald's daughters reported domestic violence. A little later, Kiana herself called the police, telling them that she had just shot her husband and asking them to send help as soon as possible. Although the police and ambulance arrived quickly, it turned out that after the call, Kiana attacked herself as well. At this time, Kiana was still alive, however, they could not save her. That day, both Kiana and Ronald died. Although the details of what actually happened in that house remain a mystery, it is clear that the spouses had been arguing for some time, and during the quarrel, Kiana pulled out a weapon. What ultimately led to this tragedy shocked everyone. The self-confident, promiscuous swindler took everything he could from his wife, who was too proud and angry to let him go. As a result, both spouses died. Their reputation, which they had cared so much about over the last few years, would now be revealed to their subscribers, who would come to know the kind of people they truly were. That they had lied to themselves and others all this time. Yes, Kiana and Ronald managed to hide their secrets until the very moment of death, but it was clearly not worth it. Now their 8 children will grow up without parents, and the truth about Kiana and Ronald has finally come out. The al-Maliki family moved to the United States from Iraq when Noor was 4 years old. She was the first of 7 children born to Faleh Hassan al-Maliki and Siyam. Her name, Noor, means light of God. Although she fully embraced American culture, she also maintained her Iraqi heritage. She spoke Arabic fluently and identified as a Muslim, like her parents. However, in early 2009, she moved out from her parents' home after a disagreement about her lifestyle choices, which included wearing tight jeans, makeup, having boyfriends, and participating in modeling. Noor's pictures, many taken from her Facebook and MySpace accounts, circulated widely on the internet. They featured a beautiful young woman with long black hair and a thoughtful expression. Noor seldom smiled in these photos, possibly due to her past experience with braces. However, her friends describe her as cheerful and humorous. At school, she was known for being fun-loving and easily made friends. She played tennis. Her style consisted of dark jeans, sandals, and flowing tops from Forever 21. In short, Noor was an American girl just like any other. At home, Noor lived in a much harsher environment. She was often responsible for taking care of her younger siblings. Her father, Faleh, was strict and controlling. He disapproved of her socializing with boys, wearing jeans, or sharing photos of herself online. Noor's main duty was to obey his orders, or face punishment. He believed that the only change in her life would come when she married a man he chose for her back in Iraq. However, Noor envisioned a different future for herself. Having spent 16 years in the United States, she dreamed of becoming a teacher, marrying someone she truly loved, and most importantly, having the freedom to make her own decisions. Noor's friends have different accounts of what happened, but it's evident that her marriage was a focus for her parents. They deceived her into traveling to Iraq by saying they needed to visit a sick relative, but once they arrived, Noor discovered that she was there to be married. It's unclear if a wedding actually occurred. Some friends say she only attended an engagement ceremony, while others believe she was married against her will. Her parents, in police reports, insisted that a marriage did happen. Regardless, Noor returned to Arizona a few months later, without a husband, and moved back in with her family. Friends say she missed her younger siblings, and her parents needed assistance in taking care of them. The al-Maliki family lived in a subdivision in Phoenix called Paradise Views, which looked comfortable and suggested they were achieving some of the tangible aspects of the American dream. Noor's mother had been hired by a California company to help prepare American soldiers for cultural differences they might encounter in the Middle East. This was an odd situation, given her struggle to fulfill a similar role in her own daughter's life. After Noor returned from Iraq, the atmosphere in the al-Maliki home became tense. Noor took care of her siblings and worked on her school assignments for her high school diploma. However, by May 2008, tensions peaked. Noor's father discovered a photo of her with male friends on MySpace and disapproved. The conflict escalated to the point where Noor considered moving out. One day, after Noor using the family car to visit a cousin, her father reported it stolen. When Noor found out, she abandoned the car on the side of the road and walked away. According to police records, her father wanted to press charges against her to teach her a lesson, claiming that she was bringing shame to the family and that her plans to move out looked bad. Eventually, Noor did move in with a friend, but after several confrontations with her father and discovering that her mother gave her friend's family a hard time, so she decided to return home. Noor's 20th birthday in February 2009 became a breaking point. After another family fight, this one in the middle of the night, she phoned a friend to come and get her. Noor came running out the door wearing her pajamas, carrying a purse and a roll of gift wrap, as her father chased her across the lawn. Noor jumped into the back seat, and the friend drove away. That night, Noor moved in with the friend who had picked her up, ultimately enlisting the police to protect her as she retrieved her things from the family home. In the spring of 2009, Noor got her own apartment. Her friends helped her furnish it with a new mirror and a cloudy TV they found on Craigslist for $25. Noor worked hard to support herself. When her parents learned where she was working, they started showing up and insisting that she move back home. She then got a job across town as a hostess at Applebee's. They turned up there too, leaving her no choice but to abandon that job as well. With no source of income, she was forced to return home once more. The final blow-up came that summer. In June 2009, longtime family friend Amal Khalif awoke to find Noor sleeping in the family's van parked in the driveway. Noor said her parents had hit her. Amal, a mother of 4, took her in. To Noor's family, this was the ultimate indignity. Their daughter had chosen to live with another Iraqi family instead of her own. On July 20th, Noor's parents entered Amal's home unannounced and began banging on her bedroom door. Amal dialed 911 after Noor's father started regularly harassing the family. Amal's husband, Raiken, explained to him that Noor was free to live where she chose. "This is America," he said. In the weeks that followed, Noor began a romantic relationship with Marwan, Amal's son. When Noor's father learned about this, he threatened her, insisting that if she didn't leave her current home, there would be severe consequences. Although Noor attempted to obtain a restraining order, she never completed the necessary paperwork. On October 20th, 2009, at 1:06 p.m., Noor sent a text message to a friend saying, "Her dad is here at the welfare office." She hadn't seen her father, Fele, since moving out of their home in Glendale months earlier, and his presence filled her with fear. She was aware that he would stop at nothing to regain control over her life. Noor was inside an Arizona Department of Economic Security office in Peoria when she sent the message, sitting next to Amal, Marwan's mother. The Al-Maliki family, especially Noor's father, felt anger and shame regarding her situation. In their view, a man's daughters are his property and must live with him until he chooses otherwise. Amal was at the office to fill out a change of address form for welfare benefits. Originally from Iraq, she had moved to the United States about 10 years ago. Since her English wasn't very strong, her friend accompanied her to help with translation. That day marked a troubling moment for Fele, as he took a disturbing step toward becoming an accused honor murderer. After her father entered the Department of Economic Security office, Noor sent a second text message to her best friend, Ashna Khan. Noor said that her dad was a manipulative jerk and that she had never met anyone so cruel. Meanwhile, Amal observed that Fele took a number at the counter and sat down near her and Noor. He was on his cell phone just as Noor was texting. He spoke for 5 minutes with his son, who was 18 months younger than Noor. Fele also chatted with a male relative in Detroit and his wife several times. Minutes after arriving, Fele left the office without saying anything. At 1:32, Noor sent a final text to Ashna that suggested she was feeling more at ease. Noor asked her friend if she would have time to meet. Eventually, Amal's number was called, and she and Noor approached the counter to handle their tasks. Amal remained suspicious of Fele, aware of his anger over her letting Noor move in with her. Before leaving the Arizona Department of Economic Security office, Amal wanted to check the parking lot for Fele and his 2000 silver gray Jeep Cherokee. Noor appeared less concerned. She mentioned that her dad might spit on her if he had the opportunity, but she seemed don't want to change her mind. The area looked clear, so they made their way to Amal's van. However, Amal soon realized that she had locked her keys inside the vehicle. She and Noor returned to the Arizona Department of Economic Security office to regroup. Amal then called her son and asked him to bring a spare key from home, which was about 20 minutes away. It was a sunny day with a temperature of 85 degrees Fahrenheit when Amal decided to wait outside the office. However, Noor was feeling thirsty and suggested they go to a nearby Mexican restaurant for a cold drink. As they walked west along the sidewalk beside the office and crossed the parking lot, Amal suddenly noticed a vehicle heading towards them. In a split second, she raised her hands instinctively to try to stop it. To her shock, she recognized Fele behind the wheel. The car collided with them, Amal dragging Noor across a raised median. The impact threw Amal about 27 feet away, leaving her unconscious and bleeding on the pavement. She sustained a broken pelvis, a broken femur, numerous cuts and bruises but remained conscious. The Peoria police later estimated that the car was traveling at about 30 miles per hour. Fele raced out of the parking lot and headed west on Peoria Avenue. Noor sustained critical injuries, including severe brain and spinal injuries, as well as multiple fractures. Amal later told police that they were extremely upset with both her and Noor over their living situation. She indicated that Fele was determined to assert his control over his daughter. Shortly after fleeing the scene, Fele made calls on his cell phone to his wife, son, and at least 2 other family members. It was unclear whether his attack on the women was impulsive or premeditated. 3 detectives from the Peoria police arrived at the Al-Maliki home at 5 p.m. on October 20th, about 3 hours after the incident. Noor's brother, Ali, answered the door. He found himself in a difficult situation. He had been close to Noor in the past, but the ongoing conflict between Noor and their parents had strained their relationship, leading to weeks of silence between the siblings. He later informed friends in an email that he had started using hurtful names for his sister before they stopped communicating. Ali told Detective Chris Bowie that tensions had been rising at their parents' home since Noor returned from Iraq after leaving her arranged marriage. In his opinion, Noor had brought shame to the Al-Maliki family. He claimed she had shown a lack of respect towards their parents and him since her return. She also continued to reject traditional Iraqi values. Ali shared his own struggles with his father, describing him as a habitual gambler who often visited Indian casinos in the Phoenix area. His mother, Siam, had been trying to reach him over the past few hours, indicating that something had happened to Noor. However, Ali insisted to the detectives that he had no knowledge of what had happened to her. On October 24th, Ali spoke to a television reporter about his sister. He mentioned that she had been making an effort to be disrespectful to their parents. He pointed out the differences between Iraqi and American cultures, saying, "Different cultures, different values. What makes sense to one culture doesn't necessarily make sense to another." Still, he expressed his profound sadness, saying, "Seeing Noor at the hospital just broke his heart. Nobody should have to go through that." Fele crossed the Mexican border into Nogales, Sonora, around the same time that Ali was being questioned in Glendale. He soon parked his Jeep in a mall parking lot and checked into a hotel. At 5:30 p.m., he called his cousin in Phoenix. The next day, October 21st, Peoria police issued a warrant for Fele's arrest, alleging at that point 2 counts of aggravated assault. That day, a detective contacted Noor's mother via phone. She mentioned that she was driving back from her job in California. She claimed that all she knew was that there was a family problem of an unspecified nature. The detective, Bill Lang, then informed Siam that her husband had intentionally slammed into Noor and Amal with his Jeep and fled. Siam told Lang that the woman was a liar and that her family was dirty, referring to Amal. Siam repeatedly insisted that she hadn't communicated with her husband about the incident. Bill informed Siam that Noor's condition was grave. Siam replied that she wanted to see her daughter as soon as possible, but the detective expressed concern that Siam and others might pose further danger to Noor. On October 22nd, 2 days after the assaults, a Glendale pharmacist informed police that someone had phoned in a prescription for Fele. He remained a fugitive. That day, Peoria detectives learned that on October 22nd, a young man, possibly of Middle Eastern descent, and a woman wearing a veil had picked up prescription medicine for diabetes in Fele's name. Detectives returned to the Ali home on October 26th for a follow-up interview with Ali and his mother, Siam. By then, the detectives had examined phone records, which showed that Fele had been in touch with his immediate family and others around the time of the assaults. Siam admitted that she had lied in her earlier interview with police but continued to deny knowing her husband's whereabouts. Mother and son also admitted they had picked up the medicine at the pharmacy, but Siam insisted she had thrown the pill bottles out of her car window, although she couldn't provide a reason for having done so. Siam again blamed her one-time friend Amal for what had happened in the Arizona Department of Economic Security office parking lot. Siam alleged that Amal got what was coming to her because she was the matriarch of a family that was allegedly flush with banned substance abusers and thieves. Later that evening, Ali met alone with Detective Bill at a Glendale restaurant, away from his mother. He provided new details of his father's call to him before the assaults. Fele had just seen Noor and Amal at the Arizona Department of Economic Security office, he said. Ali explained that his father sounded angry, so Ali told he to go home. However, Fele later phoned Ali to say he had run down Noor and Amal with his car. He told Ali to man up because he wouldn't be around anymore. On October 25th, British customs officials informed U.S. immigration authorities that Fele was in custody in London. He had arrived on a plane from Mexico City using his own name and U.S. passport. A computer check showed that Fele was a wanted man in Arizona. British customs soon put him on a Delta flight to Atlanta, where the federal authorities have a port of entry for incoming fugitives. On October 28, Mexican authorities in Nogales contacted Peoria police, reporting that they had found Fele's Jeep in a mall parking lot. Crime scene investigators later found hair fibers, human tissue on and under the front bumper of the vehicle. On October 29, Peoria detectives Chris Bowie and Jeff Balson sat across from their suspect in Georgia. Fele waived his Miranda rights against self-incrimination, allowing the detectives to question him. Initially, Fele told them that he had run over the two women in a freak accident. He tried to sound reasonable, why he would kill his daughter with a vehicle if he wanted to do so. Fele mentioned that if he wanted to kill her, he would go buy a gun and that he knew where they lived. He stated that he had no problem with her and that this was not the first time she had left the house. He insisted that he had just lost control of the car. Detective Bill warned him that anger could lead to loss of self-control. Fele continued to insist that no premeditation was involved. Like his wife, he blamed Amal for what had happened, claiming she had stolen their daughter from them. He insisted that he loved Noor, noting that his cell phone contained several photos of her, but he argued that it was wrong for her to become too Americanized. Fele claimed he had stayed at a Nogales hotel for 2 nights, during which time a stranger had given him about $1,900 in cash for his Jeep and agreed to make sure some paperwork got to Ali. Although unconfirmed, a more likely scenario, Fele's cousin or someone else close to Fele delivered the money, diabetes medicine, and a suitcase filled with clothes that Fele had with him when British authorities arrested him. Detective Bill asked Fele whether his family was on his side. Fele didn't reply directly. Instead, he said he would certainly help a friend or family member in a similar predicament. It's their culture, he explained. When Fele asked what he would do if he had such a disobedient daughter, Detective Bill replied that he would not run his daughter over with a car. He finally confessed that he had actually intended to harm Noor and Amal. Fele was booked into the Clayton County Jail, Georgia, and waived extradition on October 31st. The Peoria detectives escorted him back to Arizona. The judge set his bail at $5 million. Doctors at hospital pronounced Noor clinically brain dead at 7 a.m. on November 2nd. Several members, including her mother and brother, were by Noor's bedside when her heart stopped beating at 11:54 a.m. A urinary tract infection that spread to Noor's heart was the cause of death. Days later, a Maricopa County grand jury indicted Fele on charges of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, aggravated assault, and leaving the scene of an accident. Noor's violent death struck a nerve worldwide, especially after a county prosecutor officially labeled it an honor killing. Noor's life was never the same after she rebelled against her parents and their culture, leaving her arranged marriage. Time and again, she tried to live with her family over the final year of her life, but it didn't work. Fele and Siam considered her tainted, someone who had humiliated them by leaving the Iraqi husband her father had chosen for her. Fele was furious when, after Noor returned from Iraq, he found a photo of her with several male friends. In his mind, Noor shouldn't have been chummy with men other than her husband, to whom she remained legally married. However, Noor stood up for herself. The photographs on her page were not racy, just images of a young woman with a beautiful face. Noor then found work as a server at an Applebee's restaurant, where she made new friends. One of her co-workers recalls that Noor quit after her father learned that she was employed at an establishment that served liquor. Some of Fele and Siam's concerns about their daughter's living arrangements may have been justified. Amal reported to Peoria police that she took in Noor because she had nowhere to go after leaving her parents' home. Amal's primary concern was providing shelter for Noor, not supporting a romantic relationship between Noor and her son. She emphasized that just days before the assaults, she encouraged Noor to reach out to her parents to start a conversation. Following his arrest and incarceration at the Maricopa County Jail, Fele regularly spoke on the phone with family members, unaware that authorities were secretly recording the calls. During one conversation, he asked his cousin, "How is she now?" They spoke in Arabic, which was later translated into English. When his cousin asked, "Who's she?" Fele replied, "Noor." His cousin then confirmed, "She's gone." His cousin advised he to take care of himself and to talk to their lawyers about making it clear that it was not supposed to be a murder. He also suggested that ask the Iraqi consulate to intervene with the American government, linking the situation to concepts of honor and dishonor. He stated, "An Iraqi is worth nothing without honor." Fele continued to talk with his wife about the issue of honor killings during their phone conversations. The trial began in January 2011 and was notable as the first honor killing case to be tried in Arizona. Amal Khalaf testified for the prosecution. On February 22, 2011, a Phoenix jury convicted Fele al-Maliki, an immigrant from Iraq, of second-degree murder for running over and killing his daughter. Prosecutors labeled the case as an honor killing, arguing that Fele acted because he perceived his daughter as becoming too westernized. Fele was also found guilty of aggravated assault for injuring Amal Khalaf during the incident in a parking lot in suburban Phoenix in October 2009. He faced 2 additional charges for leaving the scene of the accident. Defense attorneys argued that his daughter's death and the injuries to Amal were accidental, claiming he only intended to spit on Amal, whom he believed was influencing his daughter to distance herself from their family. However, during police questioning, a detective testified that Fele admitted to intentionally running over his daughter, though in the recorded interview he referred to the incident as an accident. Amal also testified during the 4-week trial, stating that he ignored Noor's cries to stop before he hit her. He showed little emotion when the jury read the verdict. In April 2011, Fele was sentenced, at age 50, on multiple counts. For murdering his daughter he was sentenced to 16 years, for injuring her boyfriend's mother he received 15 years, and for leaving the scene of a crime without permission he received 3.5 years. Because they are to be served consecutively, Fele received a total of 34.5 years in prison as his penalty. Ali and his family chose to remain silent during the sentencing. Accompanied by his 2 attorneys, Fele approached the lectern in front of the judge and began by apologizing in a soft voice to everyone present, to Amal, to his own family, and to the judge. "Fele wish he were dead instead of Noor," Fele said. The expression of remorse was a far cry from what he had said to his wife in the secretly recorded jailhouse tapes after his arrest. The tapes revealed that his sole concern was how to fabricate a story that would divert attention from him. Judge Steinle took more than half an hour to impose the sentence. He stated that it had troubled him from day one that the press had given the case a moniker. It was referred to as an honor killing, and this bothered him. He cannot believe that a religion would allow someone to kill another human being. He would be in prison for 13 more years before dying on November 10, 2024, at 63 years of age. Fele al-Maliki's conviction and 34.5-year sentence brought legal justice, but it could not undo the loss of a vibrant young woman. Noor's story remains a poignant reminder of the cost of intolerance and the enduring fight for individual autonomy. Geraldine Kriegel and Patrick Kriegel lived in Ireland. In 2006, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. They had a wonderful relationship. Even though they faced infertility, they did not lose hope. Both had successful careers, financial stability, and they wanted to adopt. They were waiting for confirmation of their documents. Finally, Geraldine and Patrick received news that a 2-year-old girl from Russia is available for adoption. Her name was Anastasia. She was born on February 18, 2004, in Novokuznetsk, Russia. Immediately after birth, she was taken to an orphanage because her biological mother was unable to provide for her. Anastasia spent her entire childhood mostly alone, as the caregivers primarily focused on more demanding children. This lack of attention resulted in her having difficulty expressing emotions. Geraldine and Patrick was overjoyed when they learned about Anastasia. They quickly developed a close relationship with her. On August 10, 2006, they brought her home, and this date became a family holiday. From now on her name is Anastasia Anna Kriegel, affectionately called Anna. The day when laughter filled their home was the day that Geraldine and Patrick truly became parents. They wanted Anna to remember her culture, so they bought her a Matryoshka doll. The once quiet life of Geraldine and Patrick turned into a fun adventure. Anna was Daddy's angel and Mommy's princess. They tried to diversify their lives as much as possible. They went ice skating and planned excursions every summer. They vacationed in Patrick's hometown of Annecy, France, where they had a house, and Anna made several friends. She always looked forward to this trip, enjoyed France, and even studied French. However, there were obstacles in Anna's life. She struggled with learning English, and her mother helped her because she wanted Anna to be able to communicate with her peers. Anna also faced challenges in forming close relationships and expressing her emotions. Time spent without adequate care in the orphanage led her to be uncomfortable with physical affection. Nonetheless, Geraldine and Patrick were able to help Anna overcome this emotional emptiness through their unconditional love, support. A nurturing environment, combined with educational activities, healthy eating, and sports, laid a solid foundation for Anna's future. Unfortunately, the girl also faced health concerns. During a routine examination, the doctor discovered a tumor in her right ear, which caused hearing loss, as well as partial blindness in her right eye. Despite these difficulties, Anna grew into an energetic and joyful girl. However, her hearing and vision problems made studying difficult, leading to poor academic performance in elementary school. She attended consultations with specialists until the 3rd grade in order to keep up with her peers. In her everyday life, Anna took her challenges to heart. This affected her self-esteem and diminished her desire to live in this world. One day, while walking home and enjoying the fresh air with music playing through her favorite headphones, she encountered 4 boys who blocked her path. They made fun of her, one even pinched her. Anna ran home in tears and told her mother. Geraldine and Patrick took this incident seriously and filed a complaint against the boys, informing the police about the boy who had touched Anna. However, he was let off with just a warning. Consequently, the parents decided to accompany Anna to school and pick her up every day themselves, but this led to more ridicule. She vented her feelings on social media, seeking acceptance from her peers. This situation deeply affected Geraldine. It was painful for her to see how unhappy her daughter was. Soon, Anna began to inflict physical harm on herself to drown out the emotional pain. The parents realized the severity of the situation and worried that their child might take more drastic actions. Geraldine's only wish was for her daughter to be happy. Finally, Anna began to show signs of improvement thanks to personal therapy. She made some friends with whom she had sleepovers, went for walks, watched movies, discussed boys. As Anna's high school education was coming to an end, on a sunny day, May 13, 2018, Geraldine wanted to help her daughter prepare for a test. On weekends, they usually did their homework together. Their hard work, that day they decided to take a break. They turned on the TV, made popcorn, and watched a movie while hugging Anna's cousins. Geraldine joined them and ordered pizza. The children played games while the adults sipped wine and enjoyed snacks, filling the house with a joyful atmosphere. May 14, 2018, began as usual. Geraldine got on the train headed to Dublin while Anna went to school. After lunch, she had an appointment with a psychologist. Patrick, who had retired by this time, took the opportunity to sleep a little longer. Classes ended at 4 p.m., and Anna called her mother, but there was no answer because Geraldine was at an important meeting. She wrote a message to her daughter, saying that she would call back soon. When Anna came home, Patrick was relaxing in the garden and heard the doorbell. A young man was standing at the threshold. He was the same age as Anna. Patrick was not expecting guests, and Anna was surprised to see the guy. Patrick had never seen him before. Anna's joy was obvious. She whispered something to the guy, grabbed her favorite sweater, and told her father that she would be back soon. Patrick reminded her that she needed to study, which she had forgotten because of the sudden guest. He saw them leave for the park. Patrick was not immediately worried since the park was only a 20-minute walk from their home. At 5:10 p.m., Geraldine returned home and tried to call Anna, but she did not answer. Not wanting to overreact, she thought Anna would be home soon. However, Anna did not return. Patrick told his wife that Anna had gone to the park with some guy. This was strange considering Anna's difficulties with communication. Geraldine immediately texted Anna, asking her to come home. When there was still no answer, it alarmed the parents, especially considering Anna's previous issues with bullying and her health problems. Concerned, Geraldine decided to go to the park, but there were no traces of Anna there. Geraldine and Patrick began searching the streets in their car, trying to find any signs of Anna. Their fear deepened when they realized they knew nothing about the young man Anna had been with. By their own efforts proved unsuccessful, by 9 p.m., they reported Anna's disappearance to the police, emphasizing that her lack of response to calls and messages was out of character for her. They also informing the police about the unknown guy. The police quickly tracked down the young man, whose name was Boy B. His family was surprised by the police's arrival. Investigators asked Boy B to describe Anna's whereabouts, and he said that they had walked together until 5:40 p.m. before he went home. After that, the police began searching for Anna. They combed the area and reviewed footage from surveillance cameras. Patrick and Geraldine provided photographs of Anna, including one in which she was wearing the black sweatshirt she had worn in that evening. Supporters gathered around Geraldine and Patrick, while the police carefully studied video recordings showing Boy B and Anna in the park around 5 p.m. At 5:14 p.m., they left the park through a different exit, but after that, Anna seemed to have vanished without a trace. Her disappearance became a mystery. Progress in the investigation was made when they managed to find a witness who saw Anna and Boy B walking through the park. Video footage captured Boy B walking alone through the park at 5:49 p.m. Under pressure from the police, Boy B admitted that he was with another friend named Boy A. Boy A liked Anna, and Boy B was acting as an intermediary between them. With this new information, investigators intensified their efforts and began broadcasting information about the search for Anna across all social networks, as well as in local newspapers. Simultaneously, they searched for Boy A. His backpack was found. Video footage showed him entering and exiting the park, but he had been absent for a long time. Some opinions suggested that Anna might have run away, but this theory was quickly dismissed. To resolve the mystery of Anna's disappearance, detectives organized a step-by-step recreation of the events that had occurred in the park that day alongside Boy B and Boy A, under their parents' supervision. The interaction between the boys raised the police's suspicions, so they were separated for individual interrogations. Boy B's testimony remained consistent. Boy B began the interview the previous day by repeating what he had told police the previous week, that Boy A had asked him to call Anna's house, in Leixlip, just outside Dublin in County Kildare, and bring her to meet him at St. Catherine's Park, so they could talk. And that he had left Anna with Boy A before going home to do his homework. During the investigation, police reviewed more than 700 hours of CCTV footage from the area around where Anna went missing. The detectives, Daly and Gannon, repeatedly told Boy B that the route he claimed they had taken that day did not match what was recorded by cameras in and around St. Catherine's Park, which is on the Lucan side of Leixlip, on the border between County Kildare and County Dublin. But Boy B stuck to his story, offering various explanations to police about the inconsistencies between the CCTV footage and his account. They said that, on a later occasion, they were attacked by two strange men, resulting in a fight where Boy A hit one of the men on the head. Both men ran away. He then showed the police the injuries they had inflicted, including scratches on his arms and legs and a cut on his face. These men could have been responsible for Anna's disappearance, so the detectives needed their descriptions. The police also seized the boys' belongings to conduct examinations for DNA evidence of the attackers. As the investigation progressed, police brought in specialized search units, including divers and a rescue team, to check nearby bodies of water. In total, 60 people were involved in the search for Anna, including volunteers and the Kriegel family. Anna's disappearance became a sensational news story. Her photo in a black sweatshirt became a symbol of her search. Near the park, there is Glenwood House, a derelict farmhouse designed by James Gondon in the 19th century, located in a town of Coldblow, west of Lucan. One of the eyewitnesses reported seeing young people and police entering it, so the police went there to investigate. The house was 2 stories, sat on 42 acres of land. It was in ruins, with the roofs and walls having collapsed. It is unclear why the police had not checked there earlier. They conducted a thorough examination of both the house itself and the fields behind it. The search began in the park, where they meticulously searched every bush before gradually moving toward the abandoned house. The police checked the utility room while the volunteers searched the main building. It was very dark inside as there was no light in the room. The policeman was taken aback by the pungent smell filling the room. Once his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he realized that in front of him lay a naked female body, next to which lay clothes and a broken telephone. On the floor, there were traces of blood beside a brick and a large branch. Judging by the clothing, it was the body of Anna. There were multiple wounds on her body, and her neck was wrapped in duct tape. Her hand lay as if she had been trying to tear off the duct tape herself. It was evident that she had fought valiantly for her life. Her naked body, wearing only socks, lay among broken bottles and garbage. Many questions arose about how this could have happened, who was responsible for this crime. Why was Anna in this building? This incident irrevocably changed the lives of Geraldine and Patrick. The death of their long-awaited and beloved daughter was an indescribable tragedy for them. The whole city learned the details of what happened, and most people were in shock. Glenwood House, located near the park where children had played peacefully, was now the scene of a terrible crime. An autopsy revealed that Anna had sustained about a dozen wounds all over her body, including bruises and cuts, primarily on her head, face, and neck. The cause of death was attributed to blunt force trauma to the head, as well as asphyxiation, indicating that Anna had been abused. Based on the traces of semen found, it remains unclear whether she was conscious during the assault. Her death occurred between 5:25 and 5:54 p.m., just a few minutes after she left the park. At the entrance to the building, she was struck with a heavy stick that had nails sticking out of it before being hit with a brick. Blood on the walls and evidence suggested that the attacker dragged her body to the window, most likely to limit visibility for anyone outside. After collecting all the evidence, the police arrested 2 individuals. Boy B and Boy A, who were last seen with Anna, were suspected of the murder. In Boy A's backpack, a mask with the image of a zombie was found with traces of Anna's blood, along with gloves, shin guards, and knee pads. The semen found matched Boy A's DNA. Anna's blood was also located on his shoes and clothes. His mother believed he had been attacked and then washed his clothing. Boy A denied involvement in Anna's death despite the evidence found at the crime scene. No DNA was detected from Boy B, and there was no blood found on his belongings. During interrogation, Boy B admitted that he had seen Anna enter the abandoned house with Boy A but was unaware of his friend's intentions. Boy B wanted to approach the house but was frightened by screams at the entrance. He witnessed Boy A tearing off Anna's clothes and then turned to Boy B, his face reflecting the danger that prompted Boy B to remain silent. It later emerged that Boy A had shared his vile plans with Boy B. Both boys were released on bail pending a trial date, which angered local residents not only because they feared for their safety but also because the identities of the criminals had not been made public. Both boys came from respectable and successful families and had no criminal histories or psychological problems, which surprised the residents of the city. The hearing of their case took place on April 29, 2019. It was a closed hearing, attended by the parents of the defendants, as well as Geraldine and Patrick, who found the proceedings difficult but promised to defend their daughter to the end. The prosecutor stated that Boy B had lured Anna out of the house under the pretense of facilitating a meeting with Boy A, whom she liked, while Boy A took her to the abandoned house and abused her. The jury trial took place on June 18. Boy A was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 12 years. Boy B was also found guilty in Anna's death, receiving a 15-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 8 years, despite the lack of material evidence. According to the law, their identities must remain confidential. If released, they would be given new identification. However, the harshest sentence was borne by Anna's parents, as Geraldine stated that life without Anna had ceased to hold meaning. Patrick died on June 19, 2022, haunted by the guilt of allowing his daughter to go with a stranger that day. The tragic loss of Anna Kriegel left an indelible mark on her family and the community of Leixlip. Geraldine and Patrick, who had poured their love, hope into building a joyful life for their adopted daughter, were shattered by her brutal murder. The conviction of Boy A and Boy B, though a step toward justice, could not fill the void left by Anna's absence. Anna's memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved her. On October 24, 2019, 19-year-old Anaya Blanchard was reported missing by the Auburn Police Department in Alabama. Her family quickly launched a widespread search, and local authorities joined in soon after. Initially, some wondered if Anaya's disappearance was just a typical teenage escapade, such as partying too hard or being upset with her parents. However, such behavior was not characteristic of Anaya. Anaya Haley Blanchard was born on June 22, 2000, to Elijah Blanchard and Angela Haley Harris in Homewood, Alabama. Her father was a businessman, and her mother worked as a registered nurse. When Anaya was about 3 years old, her parents divorced but remained on good terms. Then, Angela married Walt Harris, a heavyweight UFC fighter. Despite her parents' divorce, Anaya built strong relationships with both of them. Over the years, she became part of two loving families, receiving support from her stepmother, Yeshiba Blanchard, and her stepfather, Walt Harris. Her older brother, Elijah Blanchard Jr., was also an important part of her life. From a young age, Anaya showed a strong maternal instinct, influenced by her mother's example. Her kindness made those around her feel loved and at ease. She was always willing to listen, help anyone in need. At 19, Anaya was a central figure in her family, bringing them joy and support. She graduated from Homewood High School, where she had a passion for softball. In 2019, Anaya enrolled at Southern Union State Community College to study early childhood education, with the goal of transferring to Auburn University to become an elementary school teacher. On October 23, 2019, Anaya and her brother visited their mom and stepdad. After dinner, they said their goodbyes and headed back to their college dorms. Around 11 p.m., Anaya dropped her brother off, continued on her way alone, as they lived only 10 minutes apart. She informed him that her phone battery was low but reassured him not to worry since she didn't have far to drive. Later that night, around midnight, Anaya called a friend, but she never returned to her dorm afterward. The next day, her family reported her missing to the police. One of the biggest signs that something was seriously wrong was that Anaya left her dog alone overnight. Her mother knew Anaya would never do that because she treated the dog like a child. Anaya's phone activity stopped at 11:47 p.m. The last location where her phone was detected was near the Clarion Inn on South College Street. A major search effort began. Anaya's parents appeared on TV, volunteers distributed missing person flyers, and search teams scoured the areas where she was last seen. This effort led to a breakthrough on October 25, when her 2017 black Honda CR-V was found in an apartment complex in Montgomery, about 50 miles from where she disappeared. When the police examined the car, they found blood inside, significant dents and damage on the outside, consistent with a crash. Law enforcement stated that this damage likely occurred sometime between Wednesday and Friday night. Days passed without any news about Anaya, leaving her parents heartbroken. They frequently appeared on television in a desperate attempt, hoping it would generate new leads about her location. She was last spotted wearing a black dress and brown boots while driving her black Honda CR-V. To encourage more community involvement in the search, a reward of $105,000 was announced for any information about her whereabouts. However, despite the significant reward, the search efforts did not gain momentum, with very few solid leads being followed up properly. Let's piece together the timeline of events. On Wednesday, October 23, just before midnight, Anaya was on the phone with a friend. This was the last time anyone who knew her heard her voice. By Thursday, October 24, a missing person report was filed with the Auburn Police Department. Late on Thursday night, her stepfather, Walt, shared a video on social media asking for help in finding his stepdaughter. As time passed, hope started to diminish. On October 25th, when Anaya's car was discovered with blood inside, her parents were filled with despair. A vigil for Anaya took place on Sunday, October 27th. Her mother mentioned that Anaya had been with a young man she had just met on the night she went missing. That's all she said. She didn't reveal how or where she met him or where they went. She simply stated she was with this guy she just met, but Anaya would never just leave with a complete stranger, Angela explained. On Monday, October 28th, police released surveillance footage of Anaya entering a convenience store at 11:21 p.m. to buy potato chips. By October 30th, over 60 agencies, including the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences, came together to form a task force in response to Anaya's disappearance. This prompted a large-scale search operation, which quickly attracted national media coverage. The main clue the police had in Anaya's case was her damaged car. The car showed signs of a crash, and blood on the front passenger seat was confirmed by the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences to belong to Anaya, suggesting she may have been seriously hurt. Investigators also found a bullet hole in the passenger door and shell casings in the left cup holder. Additionally, there was a strong smell of cleaning solution in the car. Despite these findings, there were no suspects or clear leads to follow, prompting detectives to examine the evidence more thoroughly. When detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the convenience store where Anaya was last seen, they noticed a black man loitering nearby. On November 6th, the Auburn Police Department released an image of this man, who may be important to the investigation. Detectives identified him and were waiting to interview him. He was described as a black man aged between 20 and 30, weighing around 200 pounds, and standing between 5 feet 8 inches and 5 feet 10 inches. At the time, he was wearing dark pants, dark shoes, and a camo hoodie with the word Vans in white on the back. Police reported that the suspect left the area in a silver or gray Lincoln Town car from the early 2000s. The following day, authorities identified the man as 29-year-old Ibrahim Yazid from Montgomery. Surveillance footage confirmed that he and Anaya were in the store at the same time. The video shows him purchasing alcohol while frequently glancing at Anaya. Later, he was captured on camera getting out of Anaya's car from the passenger side. Additional footage from another gas station showed him re-entering the car on the passenger side. After that, Anaya and Ibrahim drove away together. However, there was confusion about the bullet hole in the passenger seat being associated with Anaya's blood. Eyewitnesses reported seeing Anaya and Ibrahim talking near her car outside the store that night. One witness claimed she saw Ibrahim force Anaya into the car before he drove off with her vehicle. Detectives noted that the witness told a friend about the incident, but neither of them intervened to help her. At that time, he already had an extensive criminal record and was out on a $295,000 bond related to charges of marijuana possession, robbery, and attempted murder. By the age of 30, he had committed nearly every type of crime except for murder, including violent offenses. In 2012, he was accused of trying to kill 2 police officers by crashing into their car, and in 2017, he was arrested for aggravated assault on an officer. His background includes numerous assaults on officers, dealing synthetic banned substance, and involvement in robberies. In one attempt to escape, he crashed into a police vehicle. Despite this history, the court repeatedly released him on bail or imposed minimal punishments. In June 2020, Ibrahim Yazid was charged with the murder of Stephen Hamby, which occurred in 2018. He was also charged with attempted murder for shooting a woman in the face during the same incident. Despite these serious charges, he remained at large. Auburn police chief indicated that further investigation revealed Ibrahim was present at the location where Anaya was last seen, and he was involved in her abduction. There is no evidence suggesting that Ibrahim knew Anaya. She might have been a random target during a carjacking. Authorities did not rule out the possibility of further arrests and continued to search for any accomplices. An arrest warrant was issued for Ibrahim Yazid, who faced first-degree kidnapping charges and had a history of violent crime arrests. As authorities actively sought Ibrahim, they warned the public that he might be armed and dangerous. On November 7th, the police issued the arrest warrant for him. This followed the release of surveillance footage believed to show Ibrahim, which prompted a tip that led police to Pensacola, Florida. There, the Florida Regional Fugitive Task Force located him near an interstate exit around 2:30 a.m. Ibrahim was arrested and taken to the Escambia County Jail in Florida on first-degree kidnapping. He agreed to be extradited back to Alabama and was denied bail, as he was considered a fugitive wanted in another state. Anaya Blanchard's family worried that her cheerful and caring personality may have put her in harm's way, making her a target for criminals. She always brightens everyone's day and spreads joy. It's heartbreaking to think that this very trait might have led her into danger. She was so trusting, and someone may have taken advantage of that, her mother remarked in an interview. The family also rejected rumors suggesting that Anaya had plans to meet a man the night she disappeared. They reviewed her social media accounts and confirmed that she had only been in contact with family and her roommate. One of Anaya's last messages was a Snapchat to her roommate, stating she was with a guy she had just met. However, her roommate didn't believe Anaya wrote that message because it did not match her usual style. The investigation stalled until police arrested a second suspect, Antoine Squirmy Fisher, on November 22. A prosecutor later disclosed that Fisher assisted Ibrahim in switching cars and provided him with money to flee to Florida. Just as detectives were preparing to interrogate Fisher, the kidnapping case evolved into a murder investigation. On November 25, police apprehended a third suspect, David Johnson, Jr., charging him with hindering prosecution. Eventually, the charges against Fisher and Johnson were dropped. County District Attorney Brandon Hughes chose not to disclose how Johnson was obstructing the prosecution, citing a gag order that prevents attorneys, prosecutors, and witnesses from discussing the case with the media. Fisher testified that Ibrahim came to David Johnson's home for seniors on October 24, 2019, between 5 and 6 a.m. He stated that he noticed Anaya Blanchard's car parked near some bushes at that time. Ibrahim reportedly told Fisher that he needed more fuel for the stolen vehicle. Fisher then drove Ibrahim to a gas station, where they filled a can with gas before going back to Johnson's house. Ibrahim mentioned he needed to get something, so Fisher drove him north on Interstate 85 toward Shorter. They stopped in Montgomery, where Ibrahim retrieved an assault rifle. After that, they went to a cemetery off I-85, where Fisher claimed he saw Ibrahim dragging what appeared to be two legs wrapped in a blanket. Ibrahim allegedly spent some time in the woods before returning to the car. By the end of November, hopes of finding Anaya alive had almost vanished. On November 25, police discovered human remains in a wooded area in Macon County, located off County Road 2. Investigators found a skull with a bullet hole in it, along with clothing that matched what Anaya Blanchard had been wearing when she was last seen. They also found a lead projectile nearby. 2 days later, on November 27, the remains were confirmed to be Anaya Blanchard's. An autopsy showed that she had been killed by a gunshot wound to the head. Consequently, the charges against Ibrahim were upgraded from first-degree kidnapping to capital murder. He is now facing 2 counts of capital murder. One is committing homicide in an automobile through the use of a deadly weapon while the victim was in the vehicle, and the other is committing homicide during kidnapping in the first degree. The preliminary hearing was postponed several times for global issues, but Anaya's family and the public remained hopeful for the strongest punishment for the man responsible for her loss. Ibrahim, who is accused of kidnapping 19-year-old Anaya Blanchard, appeared in court for a preliminary hearing on November 20th. His lawyer filed a motion asserting that Ibrahim was entitled to this hearing on the kidnapping charges, arguing that Ibrahim did not kill Anaya and only acted in self-defense when she threatened him with a weapon. The next hearing occurred in June, where Auburn Police Detective Josh Mixon provided testimony about the case. Defense attorneys questioned the prosecution's assertion that the crime took place in Lee County. After reviewing the evidence, Judge Russell Bush determined there was enough probable cause to proceed with the case to the Lee County Grand Jury. Court records indicate that Anaya Blanchard tried to defend herself when criminals attempted to steal her car. Although she was trained to use a firearm and capable of protecting herself, the experienced criminal was faster. As of March 6, 2023, Ibrahim Yazid had not yet pleaded guilty to any of the charges against him and remains in custody without bail. His trial has been delayed multiple times. Consequently, Ibrahim Yazid will remain in jail at the Lee County Sheriff's Office until he is either convicted or acquitted. Anaya Blanchard's disappearance and death received significant national attention. Her tragic case led to the establishment of Anaya's Law, which reformed Alabama's bail laws. Her accused killer, Ibrahim, was free on bail at the time of her death. In Alabama, the state constitution allows bail for all defendants except those facing capital charges. Ibrahim had been granted bail after being charged with kidnapping and attempted murder, neither of which are considered capital offenses. Anaya's Law broadens the types of serious crimes for which bail can be denied to include offenses like arson, burglary, domestic violence, aggravated child abuse, assault, robbery, kidnapping, human trafficking, abuse torture, terrorism, and homicide. Under this new law, prosecutors can request a bail hearing, which the judge can either approve or reject. If the hearing occurs, the defendant has the right to testify, present witnesses, and cross-examine them. Prosecutors must show that the defendant poses a flight risk or a threat to public safety. The judge will then decide whether to grant bail. As of November 8, 2022, Anaya's Law, known as House Bill 81, was approved by Alabama voters. Additionally, in June 2020, Homewood City Schools established a scholarship in Anaya Blanchard's memory, and a bench in Patriot Park in Homewood was dedicated to honor her. By February 2025, the Anaya Blanchard case had seen significant developments, with the trial of Ibrahim Yazid, originally set for February 3, 2025, being postponed for a third time to the spring 2025 Macon County Criminal Grand Jury session, pending a status hearing on January 30, 2025. The tragic disappearance and murder of Anaya Blanchard left an indelible mark on her family, community, and the nation, transforming a vibrant young woman's promising future into a cry for justice and reform. Anaya's trusting nature and devotion to her loved ones, evident in her care for her dog and her dream of becoming a teacher, were brutally exploited by Ibrahim Yazid, whose history of violence and bailouts underscored the serious flaws in Alabama's legal system. The discovery of her remains in Macon County confirmed the worst fears, revealing evidence of her courageous resistance to a seasoned criminal. Ibrahim faces 3 pending premeditated murder charges, reflecting the gravity of his actions, but the pain of Anaya's loss continues to affect her parents and brother. Her case spurred the passage of Anaya's Law on November 8, 2022, empowering prosecutors to deny bail for serious crimes and prevent future tragedies. Commemorated through a scholarship in Homewood City Schools and a bench at Patriot Park, Anaya's legacy of kindness and resilience continues to inspire, reminding society to protect the vulnerable and hold accountable those who exploit them.